concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. Thank you so much for your company here on Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Lots to talk about between now and 1 o'clock. There are lots of big stories around, including the row over the 2-child benefit cap. Really interestingly, Kemi Badenoch, leader of the Conservatives, she had said this morning that it has to stay. The Prime Minister wants it to go, and indeed the leader of Reform UK wants it to go. So Nigel Farage and Keir Starmer think one thing, Kemi Badenoch thinks another. We'll speak to one of her lieutenants, Kevin Hollinrake, in a few minutes' time. We're also talking about Keir Starmer saying, people saying that Keir Starmer will have hell to pay if he doesn't fix these key policies. We're talking about the winter fuel allowance as well. Again, nuanced positions with all of that. Starmer under pressure, clearly. Memo showing that Kemi Badenoch was warned on a car choice as well. This is an interesting one over her government car. And white men apparently in a pit of worry over doing or saying the wrong thing at work. Are you a white man? Are you worried about that? Lots of people think that white men are now discriminated against in our society. Certainly there are many young men as well, not just older ones, from working classes, for example. You have the kind of really bad educational results that we've previously seen with ethnic minorities. Trump sends a free speech team to interview UK activists. We'll talk about that as well, about house building. We'll speak to an Israeli senior doctor who treated Israeli hostages who've returned from captivity in Gaza under Hamas terrorist captivity there. The news, of course, over the last couple of days that 9 of a Gazan doctor's 10 children have been killed in an Israeli strike on Khan Yunis in the south of Gaza. We'll talk about the taxpayer cash being used for a woke flag. This is a flag, a pride flag, that costs £674.17. Yes, really. And everything that Nigel Farage is doing. Big speech this week. Could he outflank Starmer on a number of different fronts? Let us know your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. And remember, the main number does 3 things. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Well, Andy Preston is our first guest. He's a political commentator and the former Mayor of Middlesbrough. Andy, you're very welcome to the programme. Lots around this morning. How are you?
Hi, Peter. I'm good, thank you. Happy Sunday.
Yes, there's a lot to discuss. Certainly, Kemi Badenoch has been speaking to Sky News. She has been saying that she thinks that the two-child benefit cap should stay. Interesting one from her. And Keir Starmer looking towards perhaps getting it abolished. £3.5 billion that would cost. Where do you stand on this?
Well, it's a really interesting question, Peter. So I've got a view, but before I share it, I was soliciting opinion on this probably 9 months ago, and it was really interesting. There are a lot of really hard-working people who are struggling, and they really resent, or many of them really resent the fact that other people in receipt of benefits can keep having kids and actually they don't struggle. They actually just get more and more money to compensate that. So there's a lot of frustration out there. But the other side, which is really legitimate, is that benefits are designed to be the minimum, the bare minimum you can live a decent life on. So if somebody has 3 kids, whether it was a reckless act or not, that's not the point. If they have 3, 4 or 5 kids, the family will be pushed into poverty. And the consequences of that, Peter and listeners, are huge, not just for the kids directly, but for all of us as taxpayers with worse health conditions, worse mental health, poorer performance at school, and probably increased costs in the criminal justice system. So there's a very strong case to make sure that nobody ever goes hungry and that we increase benefits with kids. But it's not fair on hardworking people. My personal view, I'll get round to it now, is somewhere in the middle, and that we don't cap benefits as such, but we stop giving extra cash. So above 2 kids, we give people vouchers, carefully considered vouchers for a local shop, which can only be spent on food and can only be spent on things like school uniform. And I think that's the middle ground. Yeah. There's a really weird set of circumstances in this country where we talk about benefits, winter fuel allowance, for example. The Labour government is saying you have an income as a pensioner of £11,500. You don't need the winter fuel allowance. You don't need this extra benefit. Yet when it comes to child benefit, we're in a position where you can earn nearly £80,000 as a couple and still get benefits. Why is someone on £80,000 a year, or a household bringing in £80,000 a year, getting any benefits for anything? I just think the system doesn't quite work, Andy, and the priorities are not quite right. I totally agree. I think there are some benefits, Peter, that are attached to children and usually disabilities where the public is highly repulsed by the idea of even touching them. So they become sacred cows, don't they? And whether they're right or wrong almost doesn't matter. It's politically untouchable. I mean, if we talk about the winter fuel payment quickly, the way Labour handled that was really bad, really clumsy. But they were half right. They got it half right, is that basically benefits should be there to help people. It should be a safety net. We should make sure that no pensioner is ever cold or needy and that they're fully supported. But for example, my mother, who's not wealthy but is comfortable, my mother shouldn't get winter fuel payment because that money should be being directed to people in need across the country. So some degree of means testing is very important and is very fair. But Labour handled the winter fuel payments really well. And it's, of course, in steps Nigel Farage to wave the flag for all pensioners. We'll get on to that in just a second because he has a major speech coming up this week. But let's just find out now exactly what Kemi Badenoch has been saying and put the fascinating context of this, because Starmer is to scrap the child benefit cap. That's the main story in The Observer today. Everybody, well, a lot of people certainly talking about it. Kemi Badenoch was asked about it on Sky News by Trevor Phillips. This is what she said.
The two-child benefit cap?
Yes.
It needs to stay. There was a reason why we brought it in, and it was brought in better economic times than we have now. But the fact is, our welfare bill continues to grow. We're spending over £100 billion on servicing debt interests every year. We're borrowing to pay welfare. The two-child benefit cap is reasonable. It's the right thing to do, and we want people to know that we manage the economy properly. That's what a government should be doing. I don't think it is right to scrap it.
Stuart has been in touch on WhatsApp and says, Peter, the counter-argument to lifting the two-child cap is why should other people pay higher tax to bring up your children? I think Stuart and Kemi Badenoch would agree. Andy, your thoughts on what Kemi Badenoch has said?
I think she said the right thing, because until she spoke, which I think that was this morning, is that correct?
Yes, that's right, on Sky News. Yeah.
So when I was thinking about this morning, actually, this issue this morning, and listening to the news, it was really clear that Farage had created the debate. Farage had pushed Starmer into a horrible position where he's backtracking. He's going to have to do another U-turn. And I thought, well, actually, the biggest loser of this might be Kemi Badenoch and the Tories, because they're not involved in the debate. So good for her for stepping in. And Farage has got to be careful, because while it's great, and he's trying to win, obviously, the blue Labour vote, the traditional Labour vote, not the metropolitan vote, but the traditional socially conservative Labour vote. He's trying to win that by protecting benefits, and I understand that. He is going to alienate a lot of hard-working people who are struggling, the people I mentioned earlier on, who are resentful. So I think Kemi Badenoch has got a niche there that she can work with. My personal view is she's got to be more strident with that messaging and be even more strong.
She's certainly not getting through. It's really interesting, though, with Farage, the Sunday Telegraph saying Farage should outflank Starmer on benefits, the Reform leader pledging to reinstate winter fuel payments and fully scrap the two-child cap, just what we're talking about there. He's got a big speech this week, certainly, his first big speech anyway, since those council elections where Reform did really well. I wonder, is Nigel Farage, let's just play the cynical card just for a second, is he trying to be all things to all men when he's saying things like scrap the two-child benefit cap, nationalise British Steel, but at the same time a more right-wing message on other things? I mean, his economic message seems to be one of nearly, well, not quite socialism, I'll be careful what I say, but certainly some socialistic measures anyway.
Absolutely, Peter. He is. That's the phrase. Farage is trying to become all things to all men, and that's a really dangerous policy. It's very attractive for a politician, you know, seeking that impossible goal of universal popularity. I suspect it will actually backfire, because it will position him over the next 1, 2 and 3 years as part of the mainstream, as part of the establishment, as a politician without a fixed and direct message. And I think the clarity and simplicity of his messages in the past has been his strength. So I think he's diluting the Farageness of him. He's diluting the thing that people love. And I would suspect that his quest for the blue Labour vote and his quest for mixed economy economics will probably backfire.
Very interesting, because of course he has time now and he has the space to have a record, because people like what Nigel Farage says. There's absolutely no doubt about that. We've seen that borne out electorally now in 2 elections, but actually what he does is something different. But now we're in a position where many councils who have executive power will do things. People will judge them on their record, and there are 2 mayors, of course. There is another MP as well. She doesn't have executive power, but 2 of the mayors have, and those councils do as well. Do you think it's an opportunity for Reform UK, or is there a danger here as well in terms of what they actually stand for? People like what Farage says, as I say, they like what he says in immigration, but if you went, you know, if you asked 10 people on the street, even 10 Reform supporters, and say, what does Nigel Farage really think about the economy, would they necessarily know as that message got through, or is it a clear message?
Peter, people in the street have no idea what Nigel Farage stands for, apart from immigration. That's been his strongest, clearest, simplest message, and the only message that's cut through. People are voting for Nigel Farage, and as you say, the 2 mayors that they have and the councils they control, while that's great for them for increased exposure, increased reach, building a genuinely national party infrastructure, they will suddenly cease to be the outsiders, and they will suddenly cease to have no track record. Their strength is...
Do you think that's going to happen in 4 years, though, Andy? Do you think that's going to happen in 4 years?
Yes, I do. I think there will be scandals and problems. Will it be enough? Look, Reform aren't going to go away. Reform is still, to me, to be honest, Nigel Farage. And I think it will still be Nigel Farage in 4 years' time when an election comes. But if they have scandals in the town hall, when people see the potholes aren't getting fixed, the easiest thing in the world to say, we'll fix the potholes and we'll cut waste. Doing that is almost impossible. So I don't think being in power in, I don't know, Durham is going to do Reform any favours.
Very, very interesting. Thank you so much for your thoughts. That's Andy Preston there, the former Mayor of Middlesbrough. What do you think about this? What do you think about Reform's record? What do you think about Farage outflanking Starmer on benefits? The two-child benefit cap. Essentially, it says you've got 2 kids, we'll give you benefits for those 2. If you're 3, no. 4 or 5, whatever, no more benefits for you. Do you think that should stay? Do you think it should go? What do you think Nigel Farage should do? What do you think Keir Starmer should do? Maybe you agree with Kemi Badenoch. Let me know your thoughts. Trevor in Harrow says, what is Farage up to? As a Reform member from the beginning, I'm really shocked that Nigel Farage wants to bring back this benefit for more than 2 children. We know which members of the community this mainly benefits. I really need to hear his justification for this, and I do wonder if any of this is an influence from Reform's chairman, says Trevor in Harrow. Well, listen, I think Nigel Farage will do his own thing, and he is someone who has got a strong mind. Mary in Hemel Hempstead has been in touch on the winter fuel allowance. Mary, what do you make of the thinking around this? Oh, well, we don't know because we've lost the line to Mary, but we'll hopefully get that back in a minute or two. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch. We'll read out more of your messages, and we'll talk to our debate desk member, Stephen Wolfe, Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, and Matthew Torbett, who's a former Labour advisor. We'll speak to them in just a second. But before we do that, I think Mary's back on the line. Mary, have we got you there?
Yes, fine.
Oh, hello. What do you think about the winter fuel allowance? You gave us a ring about that. What's your view?
Well, the thing is, to make it simpler, I receive the winter fuel allowance and I get a notification that I'm going to get it. Well, surely all that needs to be done is on that form, or with the letter that comes, there's a large box that ticks yes or no. Do you still want your winter fuel allowance? The people who are really wealthy and don't really need it and probably find it a joke will just tick no, and that's it.
Will they though, Mary? Because sometimes, you know, there are many rich people who like even more money, especially when they might think, well, I've paid into the system. And the people I worry about are actually people who are maybe on the lower end of the spectrum who think, oh, I don't want to be a burden, I don't want to take money from the government, I could do with this money, but I don't want to feel as if I'm, you know, perhaps people who are too proud to take handouts or just feel they don't deserve it. I would worry about them.
But that's the choice that they make. You're going to get swings and roundabouts. OK, you're going to get a lot of very wealthy people who are not going to want it, and those are going to say, yes, it's my right. But the same with the people who can't. But what is happening is that it's just everything is tarnishing elderly people as if either being sick or else too rich and don't need it anyway.
There is a lot of demonisation of elderly people, isn't there, Mary?
There is. I mean, once upon a time you looked on elderly people for wisdom.
Yeah.
Now we're regarded as idiots.
Well, you're certainly not on this show anyway, Mary, and you can give me a ring anytime, and your wisdom is very welcome. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Mary rang, you can too. Penny in Essex says, good morning, Peter. The only reason Starmer is rethinking the winter fuel payment is because he knows he's made a massive mistake. It's our money, and personally, we don't need it, but he's stealing it. He's a liar and a thief, a despicable human being, and he's been called out by everybody, says Penny. Ben says, hi, Peter, isn't the real reason we are letting so many migrants into this country because the birth rate has fallen to a rate that makes this country unsustainable? Therefore, increasing benefits for people who have children in the long term will take away the need for so many migrants to come to this country and maintain Britishness. Keep up the good work, says Ben. Interesting perspective on that, Ben. The population has gone down, certainly, and so many politicians say, oh, we need immigration to make sure the economy is growing. I wonder what you think about that. Let me know your thoughts. Paul says, Reform want to scrap net zero and stop the boats to pay for things like scrapping the 2-child benefit limit. Reform stands for UK people, unlike the other parties, says Paul. What do you think? As I say, 0344 499 1000. You can send a voice note as well. Tech Up Dave loves those, and he goes through them and then plays them out. Less than a minute, please, to 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
obviously Russell T Davies has said, look, it's not necessarily woke. I just see it as a bit of an open door thing. We're just reflecting on things, but you have storylines that some people feel have just been
Beverly,
a bit
it doesn't actually reflect the vast majority of British society, does it? It reflects a small portion of society that are into all this wokery, all of this DEI stuff. It's marginal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, let's go to the debate desk now, and Stephen Wolfe is with us. He's Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Great to see you, Stephen. How are you doing?
I'm very well, enjoying the day.
It's a sort of a grey day here in London. Yeah. Maybe it's a little bit better elsewhere in the UK. Matthew Torbett is with us as well, former Labour advisor. How are you doing?
I'm good, are you?
Yeah, very well. Let's start with Starmer here, and that's sort of a slightly weird position where you've got Nigel Farage and Starmer basically agreeing on lifting the two-child benefit cap. But Kemi Badenoch, let's actually just remind ourselves what she's been saying on Sky News this morning. She was asked by Trevor Phillips what her position is on this. I'll get your reaction, Matthew, and Stephen's as well in just a second, but let's just remind ourselves what Kemi Badenoch said to Sky News on the two-child benefit cap. Big controversy at the moment.
The two-child benefit cap?
Yes.
It needs to stay. There was a reason why we brought it in, and it was brought in better economic times than we have now. But the fact is, our welfare bill continues to grow. We're spending over 100 billion on servicing debt interests every year. We're borrowing to pay welfare. The two-child benefit cap is reasonable. It's the right thing to do. And we want people to know that we manage the economy properly. That's what a government should be doing. I don't think it is right to scrap it.
Whereas on the front page of The Observer, we have Starmer to scrap child benefit cap. We also have the front page of the Sunday Telegraph telling us that Nigel Farage wants to outflank Starmer on benefits, and he's pledged to reinstate the winter fuel payments and fully scrap the two-child benefit cap. Matthew?
I think there will be an audience for Kemi Badenoch's argument. I think some people think it is fair and that, you know, if you're going to have more than two kids, then you should plan for that, and maybe if you can't afford them, you don't have them. I just think it comes across as a bit callous and a bit cruel to lots of different people, especially those with more than two kids. And I know people vote for differences, but maybe there's a longer term game to this for Kemi Badenoch. I think the Conservatives maybe need to appreciate they're not going to win the next election. You can put anybody you want in. They've had their time, people have made their minds up, and it's going to be bruising for a little bit. And I think maybe talking about the economy and managing it properly sort of stops the bleeding a little bit at the next election. I think, honestly, the main aim for them should be losing no more seats. And if you can gain some, you try and get yourself up to about 200, you've done all right. And then there's a platform to build on, I think, at the moment. And that's where I thought Labour would have been when we lost in 2019. We got lucky, really, with Liz Truss and COVID and all sorts of manner of other things, Partygate and whatever else. So maybe there's a longer term game. I just think she comes across, you know, it's a bit callous and pernicious for me.
Do you think it's callous, Stephen?
I don't necessarily believe it's callous. Look, I grew up in a council house in which we had child benefits, so I do recognise that. And I think one of the points that Kemi Badenoch makes is that about the cost of the times, we have difficulties with all those costs that she set out. So I do fully understand that. There is a more strategic point in terms of the numbers, the large numbers of people who have more than two children tend not to be Indigenous British now. They tend to be those who are coming across who are getting indefinite right to remain here. And so I think there's an argument there that she's, I think, whistling to one particular direction in the saying it's part of our immigration policy on that. The Rachel Reeves argument is probably a little bit stronger in terms of saying that if we open this out, it becomes a bit more of a fiscal issue for them. But when Matthew
3.5 billion quid, and actually we're in this weird place where Rachel Reeves is resistant to this. Of course, she keeps talking about 22 billion black hole, which a lot of people say doesn't exist, including some very respected economists. But if she's going to have this big giveaway on child benefit, giveaway on winter fuel, many people say those things should be given away, and that's a perfectly legitimate argument, but it undermines her previous argument, doesn't it?
Well, I certainly think it does, and my point about the idea of the winter fuel allowance, I think, was a big mistake by the Labour Party, and it's the right thing to do is to roll back on that. It was never a consistently sensible policy to implement for them, particularly after they come into government. The key point that looking at this, though, is where Farage is on that, and the Farage is, as we've been saying for a long while, is tacking to the left. He thinks this is part of the old conservative northern conservative values of social conservatism moving in this direction. It's not. The whole concept of this was much more of a socialist ideology that came in really originally starting around the Tony Benn days and then moving on. As I say, I think it's an important part of our policy to protect people is to have child benefit. The question is how many and how do you look onto it.
Are you surprised that Farage is saying that we should scrap the two-child benefit cap?
No, because the whole purpose of Farage is he's running out of ideas of how to actually consolidate what he thinks is the middle ground that he needs to get and consolidate what he believes is the red wall. And so he's not really looking at to what they really want. He's thinking that, well, this is the same idea of that of the socialists and the Labour Party, as they term it, so we're going to just do what they did in the past, and that way that'll secure us as saying we're safe for the economy, we're safer looking after working people. He's not really thinking about the full dynamics of the policies, the cost, the implication. It's just a short-term hit that satisfies his own short-term language when it comes to policy making.
Do you agree with that, Matthew?
I'd say it's the policy. The policy sort of is low-hanging fruit. It's an easy one to grab, and that quick injection of feeling good again. And I think it plays into actually what Reform have done well on fairness, whether it be immigration, whether it be other elements of social policy. The idea that the government are horrible and are taking things from you, and also they're letting people from this country jump the queue ahead of you. That isn't fair, and British people have a great sense of fairness. I think where reality may hit them in the face a little bit is what we've seen recently, where originally I think Richard Tice had said he wanted the tax threshold to go up to £20,000 for most people. He's now rode back on that and said, well, that's a destination we'd like to reach eventually, because there would be a 90 billion black hole in the Treasury at the end of that Parliament if they were to win. So it's an easy win for now. £3.5 billion isn't a lot to find, even in bad times. I think, you slap 1% on corporation tax, you'll get double that. And maybe not the bad optics you would get of taking winter fuel away from older people. So, I think it's a short-term hit. I'd agree with Stephen.
Let's hear a voice note from Karen, who's been in touch on this.
Hi, Peter. I agree with Kemi Badenoch. The two-child benefit cap should stay. Now, I was a single parent. I had one child. I didn't then go and have more children. I actually got a better job so she could have a better start in life. And that's a life choice. And having children is a life choice. We should not be bringing up other people's children. And also, Peter, this goes to appease a certain culture where they have more than 2 children. Some of them have 8 to 14 children. I know there are some white families that do that, but that's quite rare now. So is he trying to appease a certain demographic again, Starmer, because he wants those votes? I mean, this man, there is no end to how low he would go. The two-child benefit cap should stay. It's a life choice to have children. You shouldn't just have them because you can. If you can't afford them, don't have them.
Karen, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I suppose the point I would argue as well is if Starmer is, in your view, perhaps appeasing a demographic, could you say that Farage is doing the same thing? Is that something he wants to do? I'm not so sure. Certainly, Karen makes a fair point there. And your point about fairness, Matthew, I think I largely disagree with it, actually, in that if you do want to be responsible, you should have the children you can afford, rather than simply having lots of them and expecting the state to pick up the tab. That's what Karen's saying there. What would you say to that argument?
I suppose so, but anecdotally, my mum and dad didn't do that. They had 4 kids. The last 2 were surprises, they both said, and obviously there's a personal responsibility element of that. They've always been in work.
Were you a surprise?
Could well have been. I don't know if that's a good one or a bad one.
Surprises us every day now.
It was a good surprise. It was a great, a marvellous surprise.
Absolutely.
And I don't know whether they'd be an anomaly, but they had 4 kids, 2 of which weren't really planned. have always been in work, never claimed a penny from the state, and actually maybe were poorer from it. But on the same token, the idea that you have kids purely to go on benefits, you're living in relative poverty on benefits. It's not a nice existence. I've been on benefits in the past, and you've got no money. You've got no spare money. You might have your rent paid if your housing benefits paid, but you don't have much else. So I'm not sure about the idea that people are doing this for fun, and it feels like a return to politics 20 years ago of single mums and flat screen TVs and whatever else. It's just for the birds.
It's slightly different though than when we were growing up and getting, again, same sort of thing for children in the family, is that obviously the housing benefit is paid, and particularly in big places like London where the housing it costs us so much, and then you can work, if you've got children, you can add an extra £350 a month on top of that, plus your child benefits. So whilst you're not living in the lap of luxury, no one should ever suggest that you are, it's not a life where, if you have got these big families, where you can actually just survive reasonably well, particularly with other things, and that's what a lot of people do. And I think the point you're looking at is although I don't have all the statistics, I only briefly looked at the kind of demographic issues, so I can understand where the big families are, and most of them are, as the lady says, of a certain kind of demographic, but coming over from people from different countries rather than those indigenously here, which are producing less than 2 children generally. I think Farage has tacked to that, and this is where he's going to be picked up by some of his supporters. They're going to say, well, hang on, in doing this, you are actually going to support the sort of people that you're saying shouldn't be here. And it's going to be an intellectual challenge for him to be able to decipher that, because this is not based on economics. It's based, as we've discussed, all about the way that it looks as low-hanging fruit, as Matthew has said, easy enough to be able to promote. When he gets challenged by this, it'll be greater depth of understanding where he's coming from, and he's opening him up in different fronts at the moment. That's why he's being challenged.
Isn't it weird that the two benefits we're talking about, people who are on £11,500 a year, pensioners, are told by this government, so far anyway, they may change their mind, no, you don't need benefits, you don't need the extra benefit of a winter fuel allowance, but you can earn up to £80,000 a year as a couple and still get child benefit. It's just a strange statistic in part of all of this. We're going to talk more about this. There's some breaking news now on Talk. Hundreds more prisoners released by both Ukraine and Russia. The final prisoner exchange in the deal has been completed. According to the Russian Ministry of Defence, it means 303 Russian servicemen and the same number of Ukrainians have been handed over. We knew that was going to happen, but that has now been completed. What do you think about all of this in terms of the two-child benefit cap? We're going to talk in just a second as well about white men. Are they being left behind? Has equality and DEI gone too far? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We will also very quickly, in just a few minutes I should say, speak to Kevin Hollinrake, the Shadow Housing Secretary. Big housing announcement today about freeing up land, making sure that as many homes as possible are being built. The government wants to build a 1.5 million before the end of the Parliament. I think that's far too ambitious. We'll see what Kevin thinks. He is one of Kemi Badenoch's right-hand men. We'll see what he thinks about the child benefit cap as well. And we'll be back on the debate desk in just a second with Matthew and with Stephen. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch. We'll get to more of your calls and texts in a minute. We'll also speak to Kevin Hollinrake, who is the Shadow Housing Secretary, one of Kemi Badenoch's right-hand men. She's been talking to Sky News this morning, as has Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister. She's got a big announcement on housing we'll talk to Kevin about. But just for the meantime, we're back in the debate desk with Stephen Wolfe and Matthew Torbett. And almost a quarter of white men say they are discriminated against for their race and gender, according to a poll research commissioned for White Men Can't Work, which is a 5-part podcast and YouTube series hosted by a documentary maker called Tim Samuels, suggests nearly half of white men in the UK are self-censoring at work because they fear that saying the wrong thing could cost them their jobs. 41% say they feel anxious that they can be sacked for doing or saying the wrong thing. More than a third of those under 34 say they have lost out on a promotion or other opportunities because of their race or gender. Matthew, what do you make of this?
I think it'd be very easy to sort of dismiss this and go, oh, what a load of rubbish and whatever else, but I don't think that's quite right. I always wonder when people say, oh, well, if I say the wrong thing at work, I could lose my job. Well, yeah, we all could. Depends what the wrong thing is. So the question I would have is, what do you feel you can't say? Or what do you feel...
Although there's one example in this, I totally get the point you're making there, and I certainly wouldn't encourage people to say things that they shouldn't say, but there's one person who was called sexist for saying that an electrician, you know, the cables of a electric cable, talking about the male and female ends of an electric cable, which is something that electricians and people using technical equipment have been doing for years and years and years. And someone said, this is something that is sexist per se. And I think it's not so much saying the wrong thing, although that's part of it. And there are clear things that if people said them at work, they'd be absolutely wrong. But the sense that actually the world is changing and there are all sorts of things that were previously accepted that are not accepted anymore.
Which is why I thought first of all on that, I just think people need to grow up if they think stuff like that's sexist. I hate the term common sense because it's not that common. That's the problem.
Yeah, not common enough.
Ultimately, it comes down to, can we have an understanding of has somebody really meant this? Are you really that offended? And if not, you maybe need to just buckle up a little bit and stop being...
But will management do that, though? No. That's the question.
Well, they need to, and I think that's where the age thing is interesting. Most people would expect people of a certain generation, maybe not keeping up with the pace of change of society, to be the ones most worried. I think the concerning thing is this is men under the age of 34, under the age of my age. Yeah. We've all sort of grown up in a world that has changed quite quickly, but in where I think we've all been quite good at keeping up with what is or isn't acceptable or what is or isn't right.
But I hear, and we've all heard people maybe of an older generation saying things, they're not being malicious, they're not being horrible, they're just saying things that were the kind of language that they used in their day, and perhaps we need to be a little bit more tolerant, to use the word of that. I'm conscious of the fact there are 3 men in this conversation. I'm conscious of the fact that 2 of them are white. You're not, Stephen. What's your perspective on this?
My perspective on this is that it's true. And unfortunately, I'm hearing this more and more often. I mean, I talk about one member of my family who is not of my political leaning, is completely a different level of political leaning, works in the kind of arts and drama industry, works in theatre. And in a circumstance, he, at Christmas, just being generally kind, he bought a card and a small little present that was almost identical for absolutely everybody in the team, so maybe 12 people. One of the women there complained, said it was sexist that he got her a Christmas card and a Christmas present, which was less than like a £5 each or something like that. And
hold on. It's sexist to give someone a Christmas present?
Christmas present and Christmas card at Christmas.
Why is that sexist?
So that's with the claim, and he then had to go through a disciplinary hearing for it. He was suspended.
Are you serious?
Yeah, no, I am being serious about this. And
what was the present?
I don't know. It's a little, little £5 thing from like a small shop.
It wasn't anything. No. It could be in any way.
It's like little chocolates or things like that. So he just got it all, and pretty much all the same for everybody. Maybe not slightly different, but the point was he had to go through that. In the end, he won the claim. She left. but then was forced to resign when the new chairman came in and said, look, your name is tainted in here because of that. And he said, I've done nothing wrong, and he had to leave, and he's gone off to another theatre group. But that's a classic example of someone having to face where we are in the modern world. Last night I'm having conversations at a party where people are saying, I can't wait to retire because I don't want to be able to say certain things about football or what's taken the wrong way. And that is the problem that we've got, where you talk about common sense, but it's no common sense anymore. It destroys the level of banter and humour in workplaces where you're having to be very, very careful about it. And the sensitivities are really too sensitive about it, and that's where I agree with you, Matthew. My personal view on that is that that person who made that claim against the individual about the Christmas card should have been suspended. You know,
or alternatively just said, catch yourself on, come on.
Yeah,
honestly,
but management will not do that. And it's because this, and I go into this, is this stemming from a really, really important piece of legislation, the Race Relations Act in the 60s and the 70s. The way that has now been extended, as all legislation does, to get broader and broader to the extent where we have non-crime hate incidents.
Yeah.
And that is where the extensions go. And I'd like to see a revocation of most of these legislation to go back to what they meant to be, good old fairness and non-discrimination, not to the level where you do what we do now.
The thing is, I actually think that's slightly different, because he's not even said or done anything from what Stephen's told us. This is people feeling worried they might say something wrong.
Yeah.
That person's not even done anything, your relative.
But that's the extent.
Well, astounding, really. I think my only concerns again, though, is people feeling that they've missed out on a job because of their race and gender. Yeah. How does he know? That's essentially saying I've looked at a black and brown person that's got the job.
Oh, well, we know that
they've only got that because they're black and brown.
I was told in terms by someone at a major broadcasting company, not this one, a major broadcasting company that it wouldn't be right to name, that my career would not be advancing because I'm a white man.
Yeah. South Yorkshire Police, they've made it very clear, our security services have made it very clear that they're only going to take people from a different colour. We know that within the police forces, that they've actually made limits to how far you can go as a white person. They're not, some of these are being challenged in the courts now, and quite rightly. I mean, I'd love to be a lawyer involved in all of those. Quite frankly, I'd have a lot of fun, to be honest, challenging the senior authorities. But you should be based on how good you are at the job, not because of a criteria over colour, race, religion.
I don't discount that. I think the problem is, and maybe it's because of a certain type of people that draft these laws and policies, is I won't make myself popular, but I think DEI isn't the worst thing in the world. And the reason why is because I believe in diversity, but the problem is we never talk about class. Now, you can have a whole mixture of people of races and religions in a room, but if they're all from the same grouping of class, you're still going to get that group thing.
When I was working on Newsnight for the BBC, there was a young black man, I say his race because it's absolutely pertaining to this conversation, a young black man who one of the producers said we can get him to work on our piece on knife crime. And he said, well, I don't know very much about knife crime because I went to Eton.
And this is the problem. The people that are asking him to do this, I've no doubt will come from a particular type of class, a particular type of education, and actually almost are racist in the sense of they can only see people through that lens, and it makes no sense.
And this is why there is a pushback from a lot of black people about DEI policies, where we have our own agency. We can vote for who we want and decide on that. I was in the kind of Great British Strike March yesterday. I went to have a look at it to see what I was. I ended up speaking. It wasn't intentional. But immediately someone from there said, you're all racist, reform. I said, I've not been planning to reform at all. And then out of the crowd came a black man and a Muslim. And both of them challenged him and said, we're supporters of this particular viewpoint. And it is about the idea that simply, oh, hang on, black people don't have agency, they don't have the choices that they want. We make the decisions for them. And I think it's entirely what you're saying. This is about class.
No race is a monolith, as you'll know yourself. Like, it's not how the world works. And I really hope at some point we get to a point where we have this conversation about class and that having just as much of an impact on your race, your colour, your religion, whatever else. And I think it's useful to have inputs from all sides, but there's no point if you've all been to Oxbridge, Eton and whatever else, and there's what you're saying. And you get it a lot in the media, you get it a lot in politics and things like that. And until that changes, we're still going to get the same type of politicians and otherwise.
Well, thank you both very much. Stay with us because we're going to speak to Kevin Hollinrake in a second. He is the Shadow Housing Secretary. Thank you to Jason in the Lake District. He says, in fairness to Nigel Farage, he has spoken publicly on a number of occasions on his preference for getting rid of the two-child benefit cap. It really surprised me when I heard him say it a couple of years ago on the BBC, so quite a number of people getting in touch. We'll take some calls as well, and we'll speak to Kevin Hollinrake. And thank you to Andrea, who's a regular viewer in Warwickshire. He says, morning Peter, I think the cap should stay. People from the EU were still in receipt of child benefit, also claiming for children that lived in their home countries. For example, Poland, they should only receive it if they have a British birth certificate. It has to stop somewhere. And Jackie says, with positive discrimination running rampant across the public sector, which excludes white males, is it any wonder they have the lowest educational outcomes and are being left on the scrap heap? We blame them for toxic masculinity, misogyny, sexism, and they don't know whether they're coming or going, says Jackie. Lots more to discuss on all of this. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000.
So much real conversations we should be having about the types of people that are coming here, and more importantly, where they are coming from. But not everybody has the same liberal outlook that this country has. You know, they have different views on women, different views on minorities, and their politics, they don't just leave it at Calais when they get on a little dinghy and come to the United Kingdom. They bring it with them. That's why you get pro-Gaza MPs. That's why you get this Derbyshire Derby mayor, you know, brandishing an AK-47. That's why you get this in our politics. Sectarian politics is back with a bang, unfortunately, for want of a much better phrase.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Frank in Bromley, who says, instead of left and right, I think of the political spectrum as a piano, where the challenge is to use appropriate notes and produce an overall popular tune while being financially responsible. As regards child allowance, we need more young people, so make that decision more comfortable. Finance by cutting wasteful spending, e.g. net zero, and take advantage of our natural resources and nuclear, etc., says Frank in Bromley. Tanya is in London and says, I'm deeply concerned. I'm agreeing with Matthew Torbett. I think I've woken up left wing. Please send help, says Tanya. And, equally as interestingly, Claire says, Cardi P, may I say Matthew Trobbitt is a dream.
Thank you, Claire. Your 20 quid's in the post.
Or is it a nightmare? I am a Reform voter. I'm 42 years old. I live in one of the most deprived areas of Glasgow. Labour and the Tories have lost us as voters. My neighbour flies a Palestinian flag, a disgrace, while my Salter goes up, as will my Union flag. Great show, great guests, and a wonderful host. Well, thank you, Claire. That's very, very kind. Angela Rayner is the Housing Secretary, and she has been speaking to Sky News this morning. She says she doesn't want to be Labour leader. Let's see what she said to Sky News.
Absolutely not, and I don't want to be leader of the Labour Party. I'm very happy and honoured to do the job.
What kind of politician are you? You don't want to be leader of your party?
No, I'm very happy and honoured and to be Deputy Prime Minister of this country, and I've got a lot in my entry to prove that I can do the job that I'm doing and deliver on the milestones for the people of this country. That's what I'm interested in, Trevor.
You know this is being recorded, don't you? Because actually, that means one day, if you do, somebody's going to play it back to you.
Absolutely. I'll be happy for you to play it back to me. I have no desire to go for the leadership of the Labour Party. My desire is to deliver for the people of this country who have given me opportunities beyond what I could have dreamed of.
Your reaction to that, Stephen Wolfe?
Well, most politicians put in the spot like that would say they don't want to challenge the leader, which is one, and I accept that. Two, Trevor's got a bang to rights. If something does happen and he goes and she is being promoted by people within her wing of the party, says you're going to stand now, she's in difficulties, so it will be played back.
And it is very interesting, Matthew, I'll come back to you, but it is very interesting, Angela Rayner's position within the Labour Party. It's also very interesting in regard to her views on housing. And this week there is a big announcement from the Labour Party, from the government, about housing, about this thing called land banking, which is basically when big developers, usually big developers, buy patches of land, wait for the value to rise, and then sell it off, even though they've got planning permission. It's something that stops a lot of homes being built, can't be tackled. Well, Angela Rayner's been talking about that. Kevin Hollinrake is the Shadow Housing Secretary, and he joins me now. He is on the Conservative front bench and, of course, one of Kemi Badenoch's right-hand men. Just on the housing announcement from Labour, Kevin, first of all, do you think this will work in regard to this practice of land banking? You're very welcome to the programme, by the way.
Good morning, Peter. Thank you very much. I don't know is the answer. I haven't seen the detail behind the policy. Clearly, we don't want to see developers land banking, and we changed the legislation in our term in office to say that local authorities could refuse planning consent if a developer had not built out at a fair rate a previous development with planning consent. So at least see the detail. One thing I understand is in the detail of this is that it gives the government the right to purchase land as a compulsory purchase, and it's given itself these powers. It's giving itself these powers through the Planning and Infrastructure Bill to both councils and mayors and to Natural England to purchase land with no hope value, no market value. I have real concerns about that because that undermines property rights in the UK, which are so very important. That's a fundamental principle and a foundation of any good economy. And
okay,
yeah.
I'm a former special advisor at the Ministry of Housing, and I can happily say, I'm very sad, actually not happily at all, but happily admit, but sadly say that we certainly did not build enough homes. Labour says it wants to build 1.5 million homes by 2029. Do you think they can do that, Kevin?
No, they can't. But we welcome the ambition. I mean, if you look what we did do, Peter, and you may be responsible for this in your previous role, but we actually net additions over the last 10 years were at 50-year record levels, 207,000 a year net additions. That was higher even in the 1970s. So that was roughly 1 million over a parliament. And Angela Rayner wants to go to 1.5 million. That's very, very ambitious and going to be very difficult. It's unlikely she'll meet those numbers. But there are some changes she's making to the Planning Infrastructure Bill, some of which we welcome, some of which we have real concerns about, because one of the things I'm sure you wouldn't have advised your ministers to do, Peter, was to take away the right of a councillor to vote on an individual planning application.
Yeah, well, that's something Labour have done. Yeah, we had some interesting ministers. Some guy called Rishi Sunak was the local government minister. No idea what happened to him. Kevin, on the big controversies that are happening at the moment, certainly on the child benefit cap, your leader has said that it should stay. Presumably you think the same thing. Why?
Because I can't afford it. I mean, that's £3.5 billion a year, I think, to scrap that. And, you know, the public finances are already in a total mess. I mean, I think the deficit this year is something like £160 billion. It would have been 110 billion. Well, it was 110 billion forecast to be when Rachel Reeves took over. She's already taxing and spending phenomenal amounts of money. She just can't afford it. The taxpayer can't afford it.
What would you do about the winter fuel allowance?
Well, reverse it. We've already said we would.
So there's money for that, but not money for this. There's £1.5 billion-ish for the winter fuel allowance, but there's not money to £3.5 billion for the two-child benefit cap. Isn't it a regressive tax? Isn't it unfair to people who just happen to have more than 2 children?
Well, the winter fuel allowance, it's a disgrace they've taken the winter fuel allowance off pensioners, and many pensioners that earn less than £11,500, £11,500 or around about that number. In fact, many people who earn less than that, if they don't want to go down the route of filling in a form for pension credit, even they won't get it. I have over 20,000 pensioners in my constituency who've lost the winter fuel allowance. It's a disgrace you would look to balance the books on the back of pensioners. So it's totally wrong that they made that decision. We voted against it. We'd do so again.
Tell me your thoughts on your own party leader. You as a party are 16% in one recent poll by YouGov. She's not making an impression, is she? And there are reports this weekend that association chairmen and women are having discussions about possibly removing her. She's only a few months into the role. This is very bad for her, is it not?
Listen, the way we are today in the polls is not where we want to be, clearly. But that's a measure of where we've been, not where we're going. And that's the point, is that Kemi's absolutely the right person to lead our party. She was voted, she had a majority of Conservative members of Parliament who said she was. A majority of Conservative members said she was. What she's decided to do is make sure our policies are deliverable. And that will take time then to bring those policies forward. So I worked for Kemi for 18 months in the Department of Business and Trade. She's strong, she's courageous, she does what she says she's going to do. And when those policies come forward, there'll be proper Conservative policies, people will like them, and she'll stick to her guns in delivering them. That's what people want to hear from a Conservative leader, and that's what people will get from Kemi.
Do you think Nigel Farage has just given up on the Conservative Party, just thinks you're a busted flush, actually now I'm going to park my tanks on the lawn of Labour by, for example, going further than them on things like the benefit cap?
Well, Nigel Farage, even before this announcement on the benefit cap, had £80 billion a year of unfunded spending commitments. £80 billion a year. You just cannot do that. Of course, he's populist. He says what people want to hear. He's got money to burn because he's never been in power, and I don't think ever will get to power. The reality is...
You don't think he'll ever get to power? You think it's...
No, I do not. No, I do not. How could you afford to do that? How could you afford £80 billion a year? I mean, we've seen before where mistakes have happened in terms of overcommitments, in terms of spending and tax decreases, and you just can't do that. But Nigel Farage, the easiest job in the world is to stand on the sidelines and criticise. Oh, we'll solve everything. We've got all the solutions. But you haven't. That's not what the situation is. What we need to do is focus on what we believe in, which is sound money, making sure we balance the books, making sure we get a better deal for working people, making sure we have opportunity for young people to get on the housing ladder or start a business, all the things that we are renowned for. Controlling migration, of course. And again, if we want a taste of the kind of policies...
How can you honestly sit there, Kevin, and talk about controlling migration?
Yeah,
in 2010, the Conservatives said they would get migration down. They failed. In 2015, they said they'd get migration down. They failed. In 2017, they said they'd get migration down. They failed. In 2019, they said they'd get migration down. They failed. In 2024, they promised, and the public rejected it because they've been lied to for so long. How can you honestly talk about a Conservative Party, a party in government, conceivably after the next election, getting migration down, when you've failed on so many counts?
Well, I think that's a fair point, actually, Peter. We made mistakes all the way through those periods. You know, promising you're going to control migration when you haven't got the control of your own borders, as we didn't have when we were part of the European Union, was a mistake. And it was also a mistake for us when in office. Beyond that point where we could have controlled migration, we brought forward a point system that was fatally flawed. It was far too liberal. But you know what Kemi will bring forward, and if you want a taster of this, look at the deportation bill. So this, which says we will deport every foreign national who's guilty of a crime, that will disapply the human rights legislation to asylum cases. We'll have a deterrent in the form of a Rwanda-style deterrent, and we'll have a cap on numbers that voted for by Parliament, and that number will be way lower than it is today. And you've seen a halving of numbers already, which were policies brought forward by our government, not Labour government. We've seen a halving already, but they're still way too high. So we need to see their numbers way below that, but we've made mistakes. It's right to say it. I understand why people lost confidence in us, but it wasn't a failure of intention, it was a failure of execution. And that's what we were guilty of.
Kevin, just before you go, you, as you say, were a minister at the Department of Business and Trade. That is what Sir Alan Bates is blaming that organisation at the moment. 2 years ago, the DBT, when the Conservatives were in power, said they would sort out the post office mess. Still not sorted out. In fact, he was offered less than half of the claim that he put in. Many others in that situation. Obviously, Labour are the government now. They need to sort it out. But why is it taking so long, do you think?
Well, over 8,000 people have been fully compensated. We've paid out now £1 billion in compensation, just short of £1 billion in compensation. And that's due to a lot of changes we made when Kemi was the Secretary of State and I was her Post Office Minister. So, including exonerated 700 people by statute in Parliament. And that's what we did, which is to open the door to that kind of compensation. There are specific cases which I can't really comment on, but, you know, I do believe the compensation schemes that are there now generally are working well.
Okay, well, let's hope they deliver for Sir Alan Bates. Kevin Hollinrake, thank you very much. He's the Shadow Housing Secretary, Conservative MP. Quick reaction from Stephen Wolfe, still on the debate desk?
Yeah, what I would say is much of what Kevin said about housing and the seizure of land is correct, but the big fly in the room is that he ignored the fact that mass immigration into this country, with 1 million one year, 900 the others, they dwarf the number of houses that you've built in the last 10 years. We did 2.45 million in 10 years, and yet we brought in nearly 8 million. You can't have that numbers and ever build your way out of it. You will always fail.
What did you make of the interview, Matthew?
I think Kevin's always all right on media, to be fair. He's fairly competent, safe pair of hands. I'd question when he says public services are a mess. I'd think, well, whose fault was that originally? And I thought it was an interesting comment to say it's wrong to balance the books on old age pensioners. It's a disgrace. I'd largely agree. But he thinks it's okay to balance the books on children who are living in relative poverty just because they've been born and they're the third child. I think, you know, you've got to question the priorities a little bit. OK, Matthew and Stephen, thank you very much indeed. Stephen Wolfe, third Director for the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, and former Labour advisor Matthew Torbett on the debate desk today. In just a second, we're going to go to Israel to find out about someone who's been caring for the hostages as they come out. Loads more politics too coming up very soon.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. As an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. I'm here between now and 1 o'clock. There's loads to talk about. The Prime Minister and Nigel Farage united on the fact that they want to lift the cap on the two-child benefit. It's really interesting position for them both politically to be in. Kemi Badenoch, well, she says, as leader of the Conservative Party, that she wants it to stay. What do you think? Should people have to be more responsible about the number of children they have? Or is this actually a compassionate thing to say it shouldn't matter how many children you have, child benefit should be a universal thing? Let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Big weekend for sport. Final day of the Premier League. We've got Tom Clayton in the studio to tell us about that in a minute or two. And also a story about taxpayer cash paying for a woke flag. £674.17 for a pride flag. Yes, really. Also, Nigel Farage and Reform, big speech coming this week. We'll preview that. And white men in a pit of worry, apparently, over doing or saying the wrong thing at work. Maybe you're one of them, or maybe you're someone who fears for white men. This is a big survey saying that almost a quarter of white men say they are discriminated against for their race and gender, amid warnings that is pushing them towards influencers such as Andrew Tate. What do you think of that? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. In just a second, we'll talk about healing after horror. We'll be joined by an Israeli senior doctor who treated hostages who returned from captivity under the auspices of Hamas terrorists. Stay with us for that in just a second. And you can get in touch on any issue that you want to, anything you want to get on the air about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. And remember, the main number does 3 things. On this number, you can send me a voice note, less than a minute, please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring. The number, of course, is 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss here on Talk between now and 1 o'clock. Now then, an Israeli strike killed nine of a Gazan doctor's children, according to a hospital on the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza. This is hitting the home of a doctor, killing 9 of her 10 children. The hospital where she works is in the city of Khan Yunis in Gaza. Nasser Hospital said one of Dr. Ala al-Najjar's children and her husband were injured but survived. She is a paediatrician. We know that there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Also in Gaza are 58 people who are Israeli citizens who were taken on the 7th of October, over a year ago, over 500 days in captivity, hostages taken by Hamas terrorists who perpetrated the most horrendous things against Israelis. We know that many of those hostages have been released, not all of them, and there are 58 people who still should be released immediately, which would speed the end of the horror in Gaza, certainly, and bring peace to Israel. Very interestingly, in Tel Aviv last night, huge anti-war protests, lots against the Netanyahu government. I don't really want to talk about the politics of this morning necessarily. We will, of course, continue to cover the story. But the person I'm going to speak to now is Dr. Michal Steinman, who is Director of Nursing at Beilinson Hospital in Israel. Dr. Steinman, thank you for joining me this morning, or the afternoon as it is with you in Israel. I know you have done incredible work over many months healing after the horror of what some of these hostages have been through. Can you just tell me a little bit about your work and the challenges that you have faced?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to talk about it. And here in Bellison Hospital, I'm part of the team who took care and still taking care of those hostages who came back after this long captivity. You know, I'm 30 years in this profession, and I must say it is a privilege to be a part of those teams of taking care of those hostages, of our brothers and sisters who came back from Gaza. And it's a great challenge, because we had here in Bellison Hospital, we have to invent a new medicine. You know, a hostages coming home medicine, you can call it. And we have to invent all these protocols. Because we don't have protocols for people who've been hostages and under those conditions for 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. And right now, I hope we're not going to reach the 600 days.
Yes.
And as people who work in this field, we have to think all over again every period of time what are the relevant protocols are, and we have to go through system by system what happens to every system of the body clinically after all the kind of all this period of time and all the conditions they've been through.
So you're presumably dealing with malnutrition, you're presumably dealing with many physical things, right. Vitamin D deficiency. I mean, tell us about that, and also the fact that presumably some of it is straightforwardly physical, but so much of it will be mental health as well, won't it?
Exactly. So you can't separate here the mental and the organic clinical status of the hostage, and you have to take it in order together to put him the right suit, the personal suit, in order to fit the treatment to the hostage himself. And you have to, because that's why we have a team that's combined with physicians, nurses, nutritionists, and also, of course, mental health working and social workers. And another thing you have to take into consideration, that we're not taking care only of the hostage, we are taking care of also of his family and his beloved one, because they also have been through very difficult times. 500 days, not to eat properly, to be in the struggle, not to sleep at night, not to take medication. So we have to give all the package to the hostage and all the people surrounding him, because he won't be healed without his family and his beloved one. So we have to put all of this together and really be very, you know, it's not we take our knowledge and our and everything we have as professionals, but we have to invent and to look at things from different perspective, because it's not our day-to-day treatment.
And what have you learned from the process? And tell us perhaps some of the inspiring people that you've met.
First of all of the people that I met, and we had here in Bellison 9 of them, are really, they are presenting strong human spirit, unbelievable human spirit. And you see how someone really in those conditions become very strong mentally person in order to survive and to come back and really have the possibility to be rehabilitated, and they do. And usually when we have a meeting of a nurse or a doctor with a patient, we are the inspiration, but in this kind of a place, they are the inspiration. We are learning from them how to take those forces, and they do have those forces to build their life again, but it won't be completed till all of our brothers and sisters will come back. They are now dividing their time between their rehabilitation to struggling for the others. Until everyone will come back, it won't be able to really go further with their life, and we are helping them with all those with all the process in order to be there and to have a good quality of life. And it's really, I mean, you hear their stories, and I don't want, because it's personal, they have the privilege to tell their stories, but when you sit in front of them and when you hear, and every week when they come here now in rehabilitation, we hear more and more stories, you understand that they are really an inspiration, those people, and it's our privilege to be there by their side, take our knowledge and just go with them all the way till they have the good quality life again.
Thank you.
And it's possible. It's possible.
Thank you so much. A really hopeful message there, and there is so much hope, and there are so many inspiring hostages. Emily Damari, for example, was here in the United Kingdom very, very recently, so thank you, at a Spurs match, actually, our beloved Tottenham Hotspur. Thank you for speaking to us. That's Dr. Michael Steinman, who is Director of Nursing at Bellinson Hospital in Israel, who has treated 9 of those hostages who've been released after captivity under Hamas terrorists. Of course, we were reflecting on all that is happening both in Gaza and in Israel, and the Gaza attack that killed 9, we are told, 9 of 10 children of a paediatrician. The Israeli Defense Forces said its aircraft struck a number of suspects who were identified operating from a structure adjacent to IDF troops in the area of Khan Yunis in the south of Gaza. It's a huge story. It's the biggest international story. We're going to continue covering it. I'm on Drive all this week. No doubt it will come up at some stage. There'll be some sort of development. Let's hope it is a peaceful one. Let's hope it is the release of a hostage, or something that means that aid is getting to people who need it, or that peace is closer in the Middle East, because that is something that so many people are striving towards. And certainly the Netanyahu government, very unpopular at the moment. Lots of anti-war protests, as I say, in Tel Aviv last night. It's a really interesting country, Israel. It is a democracy. It is somewhere that, of course, many people of many different opinions hold those opinions and indeed demonstrate and make their opinions clear. That is the kind of democracy. That's the kind of free speech we hold so clearly and we absolutely treasure it. We hold it so dearly here in the United Kingdom as well, and that is what Hamas and other jihadi terrorists and Islamists would take away from us. We're going to talk about the sport next with Tom Clayton. He'll be here in the studio. Massive weekend of sport, including the last day of the Premier League. Stay with us here on Talk.
Even though what she tweeted was vile, in no circumstances can I claim or justify that it was an incitement to violence, because she very clearly says in her tweet that actually they can burn these hotels for all I care. Now, that is not an incitement to violence. That is basically a declaration that she has no care for these people living in her communities who she perceived to be a threat to the communities. And she should never have been arrested. She should never have been charged. She should never have been convicted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Betty, who's been in touch, who says Farage, like Labour, is targeting the long-term UK benefits claimants, the same lost $3 million that Cummings mobilised to push Brexit over the line, Reform losing them to the Tommy Robinson Brigade, says Betty. Donna in Mersey Island says your guests are right about class and education, but instead of looking to private schools or Catherine Burbelsing to improve all schools, Bridget Phillipson wants to drag everyone down to the lowest common denominator. Michaela School has a largely poor black-brown kids, but sends a huge number to Oxbridge and other Russell Group universities. Thank you to Gurdeep, who says DEI is supposed to include everyone, not exclude or punish anyone. If you can believe a DEI policy has become discriminatory, you can raise it internally through HR or the Ombudsman's office, consult legal counsel or a civil rights lawyer, or file a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission if there's evidence of lawful discrimination. And one more says, I wouldn't believe a word Angela Rayner says. She's as bad as Starmer. They're dictators. I'll never vote Labour again. They're a disgrace to this country. Lots to discuss. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. But we're going to spend a few minutes talking about the sport because it is the Premier League final day. Tom Clayton from talkSPORT is here. Big day for you.
Good morning. Very big day for me. There's lots going on. 10 games across the course of 90 minutes from 4 o'clock. It's full of action. Even we're taking over as part of Talk for a little bit.
From 1 o'clock, yeah.
From 1 o'clock, yeah, and we'll be live with Fulham against Manchester City this afternoon on this station. We've got a grand total of 7 matches across the Talk Sport and Talk Network today, so very busy indeed. I do not envy our people who have to take highlights and clips and things like that at all.
They'll be working hard behind the scenes. So preview the Fulham versus Manchester City match for us. We know Liverpool have won, but of course there's still huge intrigue, and Fulham and Man City I'm sure will be a great game. Yeah,
it will be, because Manchester City are one of 5 teams who are vying for a place in the Champions League. 5 teams that could go for 3 places in total. Man City are probably the favourites to seal one of those spaces. All they need is a point from the game against Fulham today and they can guarantee their place. But it is so close, so close. I think there are 3 teams all within the space of 3 points, 5 teams all within the space of 3 points of each other going into this round of games. And it's so tight because all of them, anything can happen in those games. It's not like one of them's playing a guaranteed dud team or anything. You know, they're playing against generally each other. Forest and Chelsea, who are on the same points, separated only by a dotted line on the Premier League table, they're playing against each other, and it's so close, so tight. And I feel like it would be harsh on the teams that don't make it to not qualify for the Champions League, but those teams that have qualified, they'll be absolutely worth it. I think Man City they're a team that next season can bounce back and be back in the title race. This year obviously they've had quite a disappointing season by their standards. They've dropped down to 3rd. They're well out of any kind of title contention, going to finish potentially as far as 20 points behind Liverpool, which is remarkable for Manchester City. Fulham, I think, have had a good season. They were in contention to try and fight for European places this season. Faded away towards the end, but they're very comfortable. They're quite happy, and they'll be wanting to spoil the Man City party today.
Tell us about League One and the playoff final at Wembley. It's going to be live on talkSPORT 2 at 1 minute past 1.
Yeah, that's right. So there is a campaign at the moment called Every Minute Matters, which is encouraging us all to learn CPR. It's a very important skill. I've learned how to use it myself, and
you can do CPR.
Yeah, well, I've learned how to do it. I've not done it before. Done it to someone before.
Okay, and I'll know where to look if I collapse.
Well, absolutely, if the DCs get a little bit too heavy. But no, so it's a campaign that's encouraging as many people to learn how to do CPR as possible. Tom Lockyer, who was a professional footballer, he suffered a cardiac arrest just over a year ago for Bournemouth. Or at Bournemouth, I should say, for Luton. Fortunately, he's recovered. He's spearheading this campaign, encouraging as many people to get involved. One of the main sponsors of that campaign is Sky Bets. They're one of the main sponsors of the English Football League as well. So we saw it yesterday with the Championship playoff final. See it today with League One, tomorrow with League Two. The game itself should actually be quite interesting. It's 2 sort of South and East London teams coming together, Charlton against Leyton Orient, and it should be an entertaining one. Charlton have spent 5 years out of the Championship, out of the second tier. Meanwhile, Leyton Orient haven't played in the second tier of English football for 43 years, so they'll be looking to try and rectify that today. They're another playoff final for them, and hopefully for that, I'm quite pleased to see either of these teams go up. but I think it's just going to be a really good occasion. Live on TalkSport 2, 1 minute past 1.
1 minute past 1. Just a very brief word about the Monaco Grand Prix. It's not all about football.
It's not all about football. It's the glitz and glamour of the Monaco Grand Prix this afternoon, of course. Lando Norris, Britain's McLaren driver, has finished starting on pole today, I should say. Lights out at 2 o'clock ahead of the Monegasque driver, that is Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton had qualified 4th and was looking for a really strong race, but he's been handed a grid penalty. He's having to drop down and start in 7th because of an impeding incident in qualifying. But yeah, looking forward to that one. Should be, as Monaco Grand Prix go, they've put in some new measures to try and make it a bit more exciting this year, so fingers crossed they work.
Thank you very much indeed. That is Tom Clayton there from TalkSport, a busy boy today and indeed on many days. Thank you to everybody who's been in touch as well, including Graham, who says, why should taxpayers pay more for children than they can afford? That's a very interesting point, actually. And another person says, do you think Starmer and Rayner are promoting campaigns to benefit the Muslim vote? The UK patriots can't afford to look after these people. Well, Farage thinks the same thing as Keir Starmer in regard to the two-child benefit cap. Is he doing that? Brad in Cambridge says it should come as no surprise to anyone when Labour remove planning decisions from local people. This is a classic Marxist move to rule directly from the centre. How dare mere plebs feel that they know what is best for their area. It is straight out of the Marxist playbook, and there will be much more to come in order to control. In regard to Angela Rayner, Glenn in Colchester says, come on, gents, you're far better than this. She didn't say she wouldn't stand, just said she had no intention or desire to. That's an easy cop-out for when she does run. Simply says the situation has changed and I need to do it for the sake of the country and the party, like Farage did, says Glenn. Well, I think it's probably the most declarative thing I've seen from any politician ever, actually, in my political lifetime. Certainly a senior politician saying, I am not running for the leadership of the Labour Party. Sue says scrapping the cap will only benefit a certain ethnic group whose women are forced to stay at home and not allowed to work. It is their duty to produce more children. The majority of the population cannot afford to have more than 2 children. Most women have to work and childcare is too expensive. No benefit should be paid to people not working and residing in this country. Well, Sue, lots of people have more than 2 children and lots of people would get this benefit. So I'm not sure I can see where you're coming from on that, certainly, but I'm not sure I agree with the substantive point, because loads of people have more than 2 kids. Joe is in Leicestershire and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Joe, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter.
Hi there.
I would just like to say I do think they should do something about the benefit cap, because people should be encouraged to have more children in the UK.
Why do you think that, Joe?
Because I think the way people are forced into claiming universal credit when they both work makes people think, well, I can't afford to have more children. But we do need more children. And with the amount of migrants we've got coming into the country, they're going to have children eventually. So, you know, the British people should be having more families, bigger families like we used to do. I think all benefit systems should be looked at. You know, if you have to claim universal credit when you've got 2 parents working, there's something wrong there, isn't there?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting, actually. You can earn up to £80,000 a year as a joint unit, a joint financial unit, which, you know, the average salary is something like £36,000 a year for a full-time worker anyway. So that's not much more than that if you have 2 working people together, and you know, £80,000 and still claim benefits. Do you think people should have access to those benefits even if the household income is £80,000?
I think with the cost of living just going up and up and up, £80,000 eventually won't be that much money.
Well, yeah. I think
you got to look at that. Also, I think they need to, if they're going to take away the cap, they do need to clean it up, because if you've got more than one wife in this country and you have so many children with each wife, anyone in that household can claim for that child.
Well, that's totally unfair.
That needs looking at. That definitely needs looking at. And also, if you're a migrant in this country and you're allowed to claim benefit, you are allowed to claim child benefit. And even if you've got children in another country, if you're a migrant working in this country, you're allowed to claim for your children back at home.
Really? I didn't know that. Gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it says I've looked it up today. So
okay, sure,
I think
sure.
that needs tightening up as well.
Yeah.
So I think they really do need to clean the whole system.
It does need to be fair, doesn't it, Joe? That's the main thing, isn't
Definitely.
it? Yeah. Joe, thanks for your thoughts on us. Joe in Leicestershire, appreciate your call. 0344 499 1000. Peter in Gordon says, Peter, it's a bit rich to argue that Reform don't have any experience of government. When the present Labour government came in, which member of the front bench could claim experience in government or even business? Well, Peter, not very many of them is the answer, but there were some of them. Jackie Smith, for example, is a former minister in the Labour government. Ed Miliband, I'm sure you're a huge fan of him. Peter, he was a Secretary of State in the last Labour government. There are a few of them, and there is an institutional memory as well. I'm not saying Reform are unqualified for government necessarily. I'm just saying that they don't have a record to go on, and actually what's going to really help them is the fact that they will be running councils. There's a risk as well, of course, but they'll be running councils. They have 2 mayors who are running, have executive power. They'll have a record to run on, and that is something, in fact, we'll be talking about at 12 o'clock as Nigel Farage, big speech this week, coming on a lot of different matters, and we'll preview that with Simon Danchuk, former Reform candidate. Penny in Essex says, hi Peter, Israel has got to continue with the bombing Gaza, but people there are starving, which is appalling. But if Hamas are not beaten, there will be another 7th of October for sure. Eventually it will happen. It's a dreadful situation, but people don't seem to realise it's Hamas they should be berating, not Israel, says Penny in Essex. Penny, you're absolutely correct. Also, what about Egypt? Nobody ever mentions Egypt. Maybe they could send some aid in from their border with Gaza. Oh no, it's always Israel. Israel's always wrong. Lots to discuss. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk in just a second to Charlie Rowley, the former Conservative advisor, about all the politics of the day. Loads to discuss, including, as I mentioned, Farage outflanking Starmer on benefits. Stay with us and let me know your thoughts on all of it. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks everybody who's been in touch. We'll get to more of your calls and texts and voice notes a little bit later on. In fact, no, let's play one now. In fact, this is on woke DEI policies. This is Daniel from London. This is what Daniel has to say.
Morning, Peter. Fantastic show as always, and great to see the brilliant Matthew Torbett back on talkTV. Always love seeing Matthew. He talks such common sense, and he's a brilliant political commentator. Now, on the issue of woke DEI policies, I'm a former frontline Metropolitan Police officer, and when I was in the job, this is going back about 15 years, the firearms unit held an open day for black and ethnic minority officers only, and they didn't receive a single person. No one showed up. And when they did a survey, they sent a survey out to all 30,000 Met officers. They received an overwhelming response back. 80% of officers said, we didn't turn up because we want to be judged on our ability and not on our skin colour. And I think that proves the point. DEI is racism. Plain and simple. You are judging people and promoting people and employing people based on their skin colour and not their ability. And I think that proves the point. Keep up the great work. I love the show.
Daniel, thank you. What a brilliantly expressed story. You were so articulate, Daniel, and also the story itself is an absolute disgrace. You could be a professional broadcaster, Daniel, honestly. You've got a great voice as well. I'm a bit worried for my job, looking over my shoulder. But honestly, that was a really interesting voice note. Very, very, horrifying story. And the problem is this sort of nonsense happens all the time. We see it all the time. And this is the story today, Daniel, referring to what we were talking about a bit earlier. White men in a pit of worry, as they say, over doing or saying the wrong thing at work. Over a quarter of white men, almost a quarter of white men say they're discriminated against because of their race and gender. Do you feel that way? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Just back to politics now. I want to remind ourselves about what Angela Rayner has been saying this morning. She is in the spotlight. A lot of her thoughts from behind the scenes have magically made it really strange how it happens, how these people object to government policy. Then the leadership looks a little bit weak, and magically their thoughts get into the public domain. It really is a mystery how that happens. Hashtag special advisors. Anyway, Angela Rayner has been speaking to Sky News this morning. She was asked directly, do you want to be leader of the Labour Party? This is what she said.
Absolutely not. And I don't want to be leader of the Labour Party. I'm very happy and honoured to do the job.
What kind of politician are you? You don't want to be leader of your party?
No, I'm very happy and honoured and to be Deputy Prime Minister of this country. And I've got a lot in my entry to prove that I can do the job that I'm doing and deliver on the milestones for the people of this country. That's what I'm interested in, Trevor.
You know this is being recorded, don't you? Because actually, that means one day, if you do, somebody's going to play it back to you.
Absolutely. I'll be happy for you to play it back to me. I have no desire to go for the leadership of the Labour Party. My desire is to deliver for the people of this country who have given me opportunities beyond what I could have dreamed of.
We're in this fascinating position politically where Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner, the Labour Party are talking about lifting the child benefit cap. This is to say, you've got 2 kids, great, get child benefit for that. 3rd kid, 4th kid, 5th kid, no, we don't get that. They're talking about lifting that. It would cost £3.5 billion. Angela Rayner was asked about that. This is what she had to say.
Well, look, it might be a signal, but it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to alleviate the levels of child poverty. There is a number of factors. People's wages not increasing, their employment being insecure, their cost of living crisis that we face, their bills going up, and their housing costs have gone up. So it's not one particular element that is going to safeguard people from the poverty we've seen after 14 years of the Conservatives.
Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, speaking to Sky News this morning. Well, Kemi Badenoch, also speaking to Sky News, says that she thinks the child benefit cap should stay. This is what she said.
The 2-child benefit cap?
Yes.
It needs to stay. There was a reason why we brought it in, and it was brought in better economic times than we have now. But the fact is, our welfare bill continues to grow. We're spending over £100 billion on servicing debt interests every year. We're borrowing to pay welfare. The 2-child benefit cap is reasonable. It's the right thing to do. And we want people to know that we manage the economy properly. That's what a government should be doing. I don't think it is right to scrap it.
Charlie Rowley is with me now. He is a former Conservative special advisor. Charlie, it's not often you have Nigel Farage and Keir Starmer saying the same thing and Kemi Badenoch saying something else.
Well, quite, and it's the political chess game being played at its highest level. I think, look, Nigel Farage, on the back of the local elections, probably picked up that there was consternation about the Labour government, how they'd scrapped the winter fuel, where benefits was obviously a big issue on the doorstep, including the 2-child benefit cap. In Labour heartlands, traditionally, that Labour, that red wall area, where I think Nigel Farage has probably outfoxed the Prime Minister, thinking that this 2-child benefit cap will be removed. So he just wants to cut the Prime Minister to the quick. Now, it sounds popular maybe to a lot of people. It could just be good politics. However, all of those costs have got to be added up at some stage. There's going to be scrutiny over that announcement. And what this does mean is that it's put clear water between Reform and the Conservatives. The Conservatives pride themselves on being the party of fiscal discipline, the party of the economy. And, you know, there'll be a lot of people out there that sympathise, I think, with Kemi Badenoch's view, the Conservative Party's view, that actually at a time where, yes, there's far too much tax and where there's still not enough money going around, getting rid of this two-child benefit cap might be the wrong approach.
3.5 billion to get rid of the child benefit cap, 1.5 billion to get rid of the winter fuel allowance scrapping. U-turn on that, U-turn upon U-turn here. And really interestingly, you could at the budget in the autumn time have Rachel Reeves essentially scrapping what she did a year previously. What do you make of her position? Is she safe?
Well, we'll have to wait and see, because I think, you know, as you say, there'll be U-turn after U-turn. Not only that, because of borrowing costs have gone up, she will have to, I think, eventually have to scrap all of the fiscal rules that she set out, which is the reason why they've been telling the country that they need to make these tough decisions, like the winter fuel allowance, because she doesn't want to borrow to spend to borrow money to go on day-to-day spending. So that means that there is going to have to be more cuts in departments that might not be protected. That does mean that there's going to have to be increases in taxes. Those increases in taxes on working people that they said they wouldn't do. Maybe an increase in income tax for the highest earners, something again that they said they wouldn't do. But they've already told us before that they wouldn't increase a tax on national insurance contributions, which they did. So, you know, it looks, in normal times, it looks completely untenable. But the only thing that I think that might be protecting her from all of this is because she hasn't had a steer. There's no direction, there's no narrative from the very, very top, and that's the Prime Minister.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of senior women in Labour, Angela Rayner there, we heard her saying that she doesn't want to be leader of the Labour Party. In fact, we've had Stan and Pinner in Middlesex in touch saying Angela Rayner was pretty categorical this morning when she said she would never run for the Labour leadership. In the end, though, if she decided to run after all, she'd just say what all the Labour leadership say when they go back on their promises. She'd just say the world has changed and that would make it okay. Do you see her running for the Labour leadership? I mean, there's no vacancy at the moment, and actually within that, how on the ropes is Starmer? Do you see him leading the Labour Party into the next election?
Well, he's more safe now on the back of that interview than what he was this morning, because Angela Rayner was so categorical in saying, I don't want it, I don't want to leave the Labour Party. She's very happy doing what she's doing. I think most people would find that hard to believe. I think she should have just said, look, you know, you're the deputy. She's greatly honoured to be the deputy prime minister. There's obviously going to be lots of challenging conversations, but she's absolutely committed to Keir Starmer being the prime minister, you know, and she wants to get on and just focus on that job. But that doesn't then rule out the possibility that Keir Starmer could go and she would be able to fill a vacancy. But she's, I think, by being so categoric and saying, no, I don't want it, not for me, look elsewhere, probably makes people on the left of the Labour Party, people that would traditionally go and support Angela Rayner, think to themselves, oh, right, well, you know, we've got to go and either find somebody else if they want to mount that challenge to the Prime Minister, if they think that, you know, Keir Starmer hasn't got the political handle that is necessary to deal with the tough decisions, but also protect benefits, to do the things that traditional Labour MPs would like him to do.
Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, has been criticised. In fact, there was a big joke at Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday about him being on holiday. He's now back, and indeed on Tuesday there's going to be a major speech from him. He's going to use his first address since Reform's triumph in the recent local elections, the Sunday Telegraph tells us, to warn the Prime Minister that traditional Labour voters are turning to his party. He's expected to say, Starmer is one of the most unpatriotic Prime Ministers in our history, and the past week has been evidence of that. The Prime Minister is out of touch, Mr Farage will say, with working people. He doesn't understand what they want and how they feel about the big issues facing Britain. It's interesting because a recent survey said that about a third of Conservative voters in 2024, the general election last year, would consider voting Reform or were thinking seriously about voting Reform. Only 9% of Labour voters. I wonder if you see, Charlie, this two-child benefit cap lift and what Nigel Farage is likely to say this week as part of his tanks on Labour's lawns.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think that's the politicking that's ongoing, where you need to appeal to all sides. That's part of what reforms. That's the coalition that he's binding, and it's about saying, look, we don't really know on a day-to-day basis what the Labour government strategy is. I don't think there is one. I don't think they're quite sure of themselves. Nigel has a strategy. His strategy is obviously to say to those red wall voters, people in the north, perhaps people that have voted Brexit, where they did vote Brexit, because it's not just about the issue of the European Union. It's about saying those communities for too long were left behind by politicians in Westminster. They were far too focused about the European Union. And you've got a Prime Minister now that's still focused on the EU and not ordinary working people in this country. And not only is Nigel going to be able, he will say, to fund the removal of the two-child benefit cap, it's because he's going to close those asylum hotels. He's going to stop taxpayers' money being wasted on policies like net zero. And that will appeal to a huge amount of people. I don't know where the Labour Party are going to be able to say, yes, we'll lift the two-child benefit cap, but where's the money coming from? They haven't got, it sounds like Nigel's got more of a plan, even if it's not funded or costed. There'll be people that come out and say, well, that's absolutely fantasy economics. But there's a narrative there, and there's a plan, more of a plan than it sounds like that's coming from the Labour Party. So it is trying to form that coalition. It is not about party ideologies. It is about just the issues of the day. And Nigel, even though he has had that little sabbatical, wherever he's been, seems to be sweeping up all the headlines.
I love how you just keep referring to him as Nigel. He's like Sting or Madonna. He requires no surname. I once said this to Arlene Foster in Northern Ireland, although I suppose there is Arlene Phillips. Lots to think about there, Charlie. Thank you. That's Charlie Rowley there, former Conservative Special Advisor, political commentator. Tonya has been in touch and says, I voted Reform. I'm starting to have doubts. It feels as if they're just throwing out policies without any real thought for the cost. I don't agree with a full U-turn on the winter fuel allowance or getting rid of the benefit cap. The welfare bill is already too high. Kate in Cheshire says, I'm not a fan of lifting the two-child benefit cap personally. I prefer to see tax cuts for working people so childcare becomes more affordable. The only compromise I'd be willing to make is maybe to raise the cap to 3 children. I think this policy will be a mistake. Reform seem to be pushing it anyway. Mac in Glasgow says there's a terrible stigma and stereotype on people claiming benefits. Of course, if you can work, then you should work. But if someone cannot work through no fault of their own, they should get financial help. The media likes to show those claiming benefits, not doing anything to look for work, but there are many people who are working that still need to claim benefits who are working as well. It would be interesting to see how many people claiming benefits that are working and those who are not working. Great show, as always. Thank you very much indeed for that. And just one more from Maria, commenting on the child benefit cap. She says, as a high-income earner, I receive no support from the government, yet I still pay 45% tax. I live in one of the most expensive parts of the country and face some of the highest childcare and mortgage costs. After tax, mortgage, which even then is cheaper than renting, and childcare, I'm left breaking even. Despite earning over £100,000, I can't afford a second child. There's no inheritance coming my way. I don't have nearby family to help with childcare or living costs. Meanwhile, a friend on a lower salary qualifies for government support, but also has family who provide full-time childcare and regularly give her money. Why doesn't this country consider access to family wealth and support when accessing who needs help? It's not just about income, it's about context, says Maria. £100,000 a year and can't afford a second child. Very interesting. What do you think of all of this? 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk in a second about what the government's spending money on, not just benefits, but also a Ukrainian flag, fair enough, £104.60. I could probably have got them a cheaper one. And a pride flag, which are apparently available online for 25 quid, which the government spent £674.17 on. Yes, really. We'll talk about this more in a second here on Talk.
even though what she tweeted was vile, in no circumstances can I claim or justify that it was an incitement to violence, because she very clearly says in her tweet that actually they can burn these hotels for all I care. Now, that is not an incitement to violence. That is basically a declaration that she has no care for these people living in her communities who she perceived to be a threat to the communities. And she should never have been arrested. She should never have been charged. She should never have been convicted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So the Government Property Agency is a part of the government that does all sorts of things to do with all the different properties that the government owns, all the different government offices. And one of the things it does is buy flags. And we, of course, fly many flags, including the Union flag of this country, sometimes county flags, sometimes Ukrainian flags, sometimes flags of other countries as well from government buildings. One thing they fly from many government buildings at a certain part of the year is a pride flag. Now, pride flags, of course, are controversial for some reasons. Sometime previously they were just a rainbow flag. Now they've got all sorts of extra bits in them because of the LGBTQ !ampersand * community. And pride flags are apparently available online for about £25. And if the government wants to spend £25 on a flag, that's probably okay. £25 in government spending, not a huge amount of money in regard to the many billions they spend elsewhere. But on one occasion, they spent £674.17 on a pride flag they could have got online for 25 quid. I wonder why. Maybe William Yarwood can tell us. He's from the Taxpayers Alliance. William, what on earth is going on here?
Good morning, Peter. And I think it's just classic government waste, really. When agencies like this look at how much money they have, they think, oh, let's spend as much as we possibly can. I mean, I'm not sure this, what this flag's made out of. Maybe it's made out of the nicest silk or the nicest cotton.
Gold. We need to be made out of gold or something.
Yes, indeed, maybe it's gold encrusted. But yeah, I mean, you can buy one for about £25. That's like an 8-foot one. But you can buy a slightly smaller one for about £4 or £5 off Amazon. I mean, I don't know what Amazon these lot are using, but it's certainly not the one that me and you would use, Peter. But yeah, I mean, £600 for one flag. I think anybody recognises that's extortionate, and anyone in the government should recognise that's extortionate as well.
I mean, that's 27 times what you could have bought it for on Amazon for £25, and that apparently is on the more expensive sort of side of the equation. I mean, how much confidence, if they can't get buying a flag correct, literally I could go on Amazon right now and buy one of those for 25 quid, and they've spent 27 times that amount. How much confidence can we have that they're getting the big stuff right, William, which I know you look into every single day?
Yeah, well, as you can probably imagine, Peter, I don't have much confidence in the government's ability to do pretty much anything at the moment. I mean, if we're going to talk about procurement quickly, one thing the government has done rather recently is cancel government procurement cards, whereby civil servants and departments can essentially use credit cards, which are taxpayer funded, of course, to buy things. But actually, one interesting story after a lot of them were cancelled is various civil servants went to a Five Guys to try and buy a Five Guys outside of work, by the way, Peter, with a government procurement card. Now, luckily, it was, it was cancelled, it was failed, they couldn't buy one. But that just shows the kind of attitude inside of our public sector, and specifically our civil service, towards taxpayers' cash, where they think actually it's no longer, taxpayers' money anymore, it's their money and they have a right to do with it whatever they like.
William, thanks for your thoughts on that. It does seem bizarre that the government property agency paid £674.17 on a pride flag. That is William Yarwood there from the Taxpayers Alliance. Thanks for joining us this morning. Lots of people getting in touch on the two-child benefit cap, including Paul Jones, who says, Nigel said Reform would scrap the two-child benefit cap before the election. This is not a new thing. It was recorded on one of the debates. So he's not just throwing out policies. This is a consistent position. And that's a very, very fair point. Paul in Cornwall says, if we had a declining population, I could probably agree with lifting the benefit cap, but we don't. We're bringing in net 500,000 people a year. A little bit less than that, but you're right. If we cut immigration, then it could be relaxed to maybe 3 children, says Paul in Cornwall. Another person says, Leslie says, my blood is boiling over this two-child cap. I'm a member of Reform, but to scrap it is plain stupid. Why on earth encourage low-income people to have more badly raised children, claiming more and more benefits, which is exactly what we don't want? Furthermore, Nigel's biggest issue is over population, yet he's encouraging the breeding machine. Honestly, no wonder this country is in such a mess. Leslie, I know you're angry about this, but you know, low-income people don't always bring up badly behaved children. There are lots of people who have lots of money who have tremendously badly behaved children, and sometimes very well-behaved children. It doesn't take money to raise a well-behaved child. It just takes good parenting, which I'm afraid is in short supply sometimes when we see it very, very frequently, although I'm not a parent, so what do I know? Mark is in Lincolnshire and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Mark, two-child benefit cap, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I've got a couple of points to raise with you, Peter. On the two-child benefit cap, I strangely have to side along with Kemi Badenoch on this one. It's a crazy idea to scrap it, to be honest, because I think 2 children is sufficient. It's fine, you know, to be funding that as a state. But when you start going above and beyond that, you know, you're basically encouraging people who can't really afford to have kids to have more kids. Now, I come from this as an angle, you know, I'm very much working class. I'm from the northeast originally. I know a lot of families where basically they were getting benefits for pretty much every kid they were having. They would have 3, 4, 5 children sometimes. They were getting a load of money on benefits. But what was happening, that it's not that they poorly behaved. The issue is that quite a lot of those families, the kids will grow up and they will go straight into the benefit system, because to them that's normality.
Yeah, it's a generational thing, isn't it, Mark? Yeah, sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's what you're doing. You're encouraging that. My second point before I leave you today, Peter, on here, I just wanted to ask, is there any chance we can have some more right-wing voices, please?
Some more right-wing voices?
Yeah, I want to hear from people like Tenconi, UKIP. I want to hear more from the SDP. People like that. You know, we only ever really seem to get Conservative, Reform. You know, sometimes it feels
Do you think Conservatives and Reform are on the right?
No, not particularly. I think they're both centre. It depends how you look at the Tories, centre-left possibly.
I think it depends on the Tory, perhaps.
Well, exactly. I mean, Reform, I would say, centre-right, but edging more towards just centre at the minute. They're both very much mainstream and establishment, which is why I understand talk.
I think Reform are mainstream and establishment. That's not a popular view.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what they are. I think...
why do you think that, Mark?
Is a Trojan horse. I think Nigel Farage is a Trojan horse. You think about it. If the establishment, all these people that you hear that ring up with, you know, banging on about Reform, you think about this a little bit more logically, a little bit more out the box. If you're the establishment, if you're the existing bubble, as it were, Labour and Tory, what's the one thing you want to do? You want to get a party that you can control, with a leader that you can control, right? So you bring in somebody like Farage. He's gone more and more to the centre as time has gone on. Before elections...
hold on, Mark. Are you honestly suggesting that Nigel Farage would be controlled by the establishment?
Yes, I think he would be. And when you think about it, Peter, he's the ideal person to be controlled by, because in his party, the members can't even affect policy. They can't affect the leadership. So as long as you can control Farage, you're sorted.
Where is the evidence, Mark, that Farage is controlled by anybody other than himself?
I genuinely don't think, you know, I think he's a man of himself, yes, 100%. But he's very much somebody that wants to be the establishment. A lot of the
but it would be a very different establishment, would it not, Mark, under Nigel Farage?
Sorry, say again?
It would be a very different establishment. It would be a very different government under Nigel Farage. That's the point. That's what he says.
No, I don't think it would be a different establishment. I think it would be pretty similar to where it is now.
Wow. Okay.
He will stop the boats. I don't doubt that. He will 100% stop the boats. But he isn't prepared to fix the problems. I don't think he's prepared to sift through the civil service and sack most of them and restart all of that stuff.
Mark, we're going to hit the news, but listen, thanks for that perspective. A very, very interesting one, and one, to be brutally honest, I haven't heard before. Nigel Farage is a tool of the establishment. What do you think of that? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Plenty to debate, including reform, later.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich, don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
And one here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. As an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime, the folk in this village need to use the old Aussie trick to stop being swooped. You have to wear an ice cream tub on your head with eyes drawn on the back so they think you're watching them. True story. We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There's lots to talk about, including Angela Rayner saying she doesn't want to be leader of the Labour Party. Do you believe her? We'll watch the clip in just a second. We've spoken to Kevin Hollinrake as well, the Shadow Housing Secretary. He has backed up claims by his party leader that, well, not claims, but her belief that the 2-child benefit cap should remain. It shouldn't be scrapped. That's what both Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage want to do. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. We're also going to be talking this hour about white men. They're in a pit of worry over doing or saying the wrong thing at work. They feel discriminated against. This is a new survey of white men saying that they are being discriminated against. The DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion, has just gone too far. What do you think of all of that? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, or you can send me a voice note, a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock, so stay with me for the next hour here on Talk. I should say that I am back every day this week, actually, Monday to Friday from 4 till 7 on Talk Drive, filling in for Jeremy Kyle, who is recharging his batteries. It's half term, of course. Tomorrow's a bank holiday. And indeed, tomorrow, Alex Phillips is going to be here between 10 and 1. Then David Bull between 1 and 4. And I'm here between 4 and 7. And in fact, Kevin is in, I think, on breakfast tomorrow, if I'm correct, in for Mike Graham, who's taking a well-earned break for a day or two. So slight changes to the schedule, of course, but the same common sense, the same free speech here on Talk. Lots to discuss this morning, including Angela Rayner saying that she doesn't want to be leader of the Labour Party. It's interesting, this week the Daily Telegraph has had quite a number of leaks. Where from? We can only speculate. From her background arguments, behind the scenes disputes between her and the Treasury and Rachel Reeves. Angela Rayner saying she wants higher taxes for some people. She wants to do things slightly differently and in a more radical way than Keir Starmer. She's never been the closest bedfellow of Keir Starmer, but that's something that, of course, she has been asked about in regard to her leadership ambitions, which she says to Sky News, she said this morning, she doesn't have. Let's see what she had to say.
Absolutely not. And I don't want to be leader of the Labour Party. I'm very happy and honoured to do the job.
What kind of politician are you? You don't want to be leader of your party?
No, I'm very happy and honoured and to be Deputy Prime Minister of this country. And I've got a lot in my entry to prove that I can do the job that I'm doing and deliver on the milestones for the people of this country. That's what I'm interested in, Trevor.
You know this is being recorded, don't you? Because actually, that means one day, if you do, somebody's going to play it back to you.
Absolutely. I'll be happy for you to play it back to me. I have no desire to go for the leadership of the Labour Party. My desire is to deliver for the people of this country who have given me opportunities beyond what I could have dreamed of.
Angela Rayner speaking there about her lack of leadership ambitions. She doesn't want to be leader of the Labour Party. She doesn't want to be Prime Minister. She's very happy being Deputy Prime Minister. Well, the big controversy is, of course, on the two-child benefit cap. She was asked about that as well on Sky News.
Well, look, it might be a signal, but it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to alleviate the levels of child poverty. There is a number of factors: people's wages not increasing, their employment being insecure, their cost of living crisis that we face, their bills going up, and their housing costs have gone up. So it's not one particular element that is going to safeguard people from the poverty we've seen after 14 years of the Conservatives.
James has been in touch and says, for the first time I actually believe Angela Rayner when she says she doesn't want to be the Prime Minister. I think she recognises her limitations, especially mixing with world leaders, also who would want the constant criticism aimed at them for their incompetence. There's no doubt she wouldn't be up to the job, says James. Well, certainly she has strong views on the two-child benefit cap. Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservatives, also on Sky News this morning, was asked about this. She thinks it should stay.
The two-child benefit cap?
Yes.
It needs to stay. There was a reason why we brought it in, and it was brought in better economic times than we have now. But the fact is, our welfare bill continues to grow. We're spending over 100 billion on servicing debt interests every year. We're borrowing to pay welfare. The two-child benefit cap is reasonable. It's the right thing to do, and we want people to know that we manage the economy properly. That's what a government should be doing. I don't think it is right to scrap it.
Ian has been in touch with a voice note on this. You can send in your voice notes by sending them via WhatsApp, 0344 499 1000. This is what Ian has to say.
Morning, Peter. It's Ian from East Grinstead. Talking about the benefits, I think all this thing about the winter fuel allowance and bits and pieces like that, it's all tinkering around the edges. What we really need to do is time limit benefits, because we all know of someone who's just scamming the system, and they have kids, the kids scam the system, and the whole thing gets out of control. So we need to time limit benefits for the majority of people. There are obviously exceptions. And we need to crack down on things like these motability schemes where people are taking the government and the taxpayer for a ride. Forget the £300. It's nothing in the overall scheme of the actual abuse in the system. And when we find people who have been guilty of this, we should confiscate all their assets. That's it, full stop.
Ian, thanks for your thoughts on that. If you want to send a voice note in, 0344 499 1000 is the number to send it in on. Get your voice on the air just like Ian, or give me a ring on the same number. We'll take some calls later this hour as well. Interestingly, with this benefits round, Nigel Farage is set, the Sunday Times says, to outflank Keir Starmer on benefits. The Reform UK leader pledging to reinstate the winter fuel payments and to fully scrap the two-child cap. The paper says he's going to outflank Starmer, says he's going to appeal to left-leaning voters in a major speech in which he will launch his biggest attack yet on the Prime Minister. Mr Farage's intervention is likely to provoke a wave of demands from Labour rebels calling on Downing Street to speed up planned policy shifts on both fronts, the paper says. Sir Keir is open to scrapping the two-child benefit. Rachel Reeves understood to be resistant. And Mr Farage apparently going to use his first address since Reform's triumph in the recent local elections to warn the Prime Minister traditional Labour voters are turning to his party. He is expected to say Starmer is one of the most unpatriotic Prime Ministers in our history, out of touch with working people, doesn't understand what they want and how they feel about the big issues facing Britain. Do you agree with Nigel Farage? Do you think that is what Keir Starmer is like? It's going to be these very same working people, Nigel Farage will say, that will vote reform at the next election and kick Labour out of the government. It's a very interesting tack from Nigel Farage. Is policies evolving? Certainly. Nationalisation, something he wants to look towards. Certainly we saw that in regard to the discussion of the blast furnace. Do you remember the British Steel controversy as well? Well, Simon Danchuk is with us. He is a former Labour MP. He stood as a reform candidate as well. Simon, what is Nigel Farage up to here?
Well, there's no doubt about it. He's parking his tanks on Labour's lawn, isn't he? The Labour Party used to be the party that supported or helped the less well-off, helped get people back into work. But now Labour's seen as the party of middle-class college lecturers, well-to-do lawyers. And Reform's taking over the space of where Labour used to be. And all credit to Nigel for doing this. I mean, he's talking about removing the two per child benefit cap. He's talking about reinstating winter fuel payments. As you mentioned, he's talked about nationalisation. I think it's a welcome move, and I think Nigel Farage is looking more prime ministerial by the day, actually. And what's also interesting here is that he's really taking over from Kemi Badenoch, isn't he? So we spend as much time talking about what Nigel might do. More than we do about what Kemi Badenoch has to say.
Do you feel it strange? I think some of our viewers and listeners find it strange. Now, look, Nigel Farage has said this before on numerous occasions. He's for lifting the two-child benefit cap. A number of our viewers and listeners pointing out that this could benefit not just Indigenous British people, but many migrants who tend to have larger families. And the fairness aspect of what Nigel Farage talks about is absolutely at the core of what I think resonates with our viewers and listeners who are supportive of reform. Of course, not all of them are. It's interesting, though, to have Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage roughly on the same page as on this, and Kemi Badenoch elsewhere. Or perhaps it isn't. What's your perspective on that?
You know, I think Kemi's really got this badly wrong, and I'll tell you for why. If you're saying that, as she has, that you shouldn't be reliant on benefits to bring up children, then that's an argument for not giving benefits at all. What she's saying as well is that they introduced this to get the benefits bill down. Well, that's not this should be more sophisticated. Just cutting benefits in this way to get the bill down isn't the solution. What we need is a really sophisticated system in place that encourages and enables people back into work, to get people working. And that means increasing wages, as Angela Rayner was referring to there. Care workers, which many of these people might go into as a career, are paid a pittance. So you have to increase wages, you have to lower benefits as well. So I suspect that Nigel's argument is one about the need to increase our own population as a nation, and I think there's a strong argument for that. But it will also be about having a more sophisticated benefit system that really pushes people back into work. The blunt approach that Kemi Badenoch's proposing is just not the solution to this. And it's a Conservative government that's failed year after year, seeing economically inactive people numbers just go through the roof. We should have a system, and we've done it before in government. I think under Blair, I think we were more successful at pushing people back into employment, and that's what the benefit system has to do. But we shouldn't be discriminating in terms of how many children you have. That's the issue I think Nigel Farage would make.
The benefits bill for if you lift the two-child cap, it would cost something like 3.5 billion. If you give everybody the winter fuel allowance, that's 1.5 billion. You're talking about 5 billion quid here. Can we afford this?
Well, I think what Nigel will have to do, and I'm sure he will before any general election, is do the sums. But I think you could make cuts. And your caller, actually, who left the voice note, Ian, made some really good points about the mobility scheme, people getting free cars.
But every government, I totally agree with Ian, and I don't disagree with a single word he said, actually. But every government says they're going to crack down on corruption, they're going to crack down on people playing the system, and it can be a tough thing to do.
Yeah, no doubt about that. But as we saw from the pandemic onwards, and a real failure under the Conservatives to address or even challenge or even talk about this issue, I suspect that Nigel, being a very different kind of politician that he is, would crack down on this. There would be dramatic change in terms of addressing these issues. Labour don't want to. They're happy to give people benefits. The Conservatives talk tough but don't deliver. I think Nigel and Reform will be radically different on these issues.
There are just two other stories in the news today I wonder if we could just get your opinion on. Simon Danchuk here, former Labour MP and former Reform candidate. Donald Trump has sent US officials to meet British pro-life activists over concerns about their freedom of speech. This is a team from the United States State Department spending days in the country interviewing campaigners, feeding that back to the White House. Is that something you welcome, or do you think Donald Trump and his people from the State Department should keep their nose out?
I think it's unusual, but I'm a great believer in free speech. I mean, people should be able to say and do more or less what they want, as long as they don't cause too much offence or too much harm. But do we need the US to intervene in this way? I'm not sure that we do. But I mean, as long as no laws are being broken, then I suppose they can get on with it.
And another story, I don't know if you've seen this in the Sunday Times today, almost a quarter of white men say they're discriminated against for their race and gender. This is research commissioned for a podcast suggesting that nearly half of white men in the UK are self-censoring at work because they fear that saying the wrong thing could cost them their jobs. About 41% say they feel anxious they can be sacked for doing or saying the wrong thing. You're a white man, Simon. Have you self-censored?
No, well, in some respects, I suppose I have. I'm self-employed. I work for myself and I have a number of different clients. But I suppose I wouldn't work with a client who was very much hyper sensitive to those sorts of DEI issues that we talk about, diversity, etc. So I probably avoid working with people who will be hypersensitive on those issues. So in some respects, I probably am conscious of this. But yeah, I think people are white men are really nervous, and young men as well. I think it's really challenging for white young men in this current climate. And I'm pleased to say I get a sense that it's gradually and slowly changing, but I can understand the survey results showing what they do.
Thank you. That's Simon Danchuk there, former Labour MP and former Reform candidate. I appreciate him joining us on the show today. What do you think of what he was saying there? 0344 499 1000. We'll take some of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes next. Stay with us here on Talk.
Even though what she tweeted was vile, in no circumstances can I claim or justify that it was an incitement to violence, because she very clearly says in her tweet that actually they can burn these hotels for all I care. Now, that is not an incitement to violence. That is basically a declaration that she has no care for these people living in her communities who she perceived to be a threat to the communities. And she should never have been arrested. She should never have been charged. She should never have been convicted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has sent me a message, whether it is through the system, through WhatsApp, 03444991000, whether it is a text message, 87222. I've just been looking at a few messages on Twitter as well. Elaine says, as ever, sound, balanced opinions, educated ideas. I'm glad Labour don't listen to you, because we would have a chance if your ideas were put into practice by the Labour Party. You're far too intelligent, and Matthew Torbett is totally correct about the class system. They have no idea. I think Elaine was talking to Matthew there, specifically liking Matthew Torbett. Just Kev says it's easy to see why Matthew Torbett, your guest earlier on, is a former Labour Party advisor. He's far too sensible to be involved with them now. Again, good guest today, says Angela. Common sense from both David, I think you mean Stephen Wolfe, and Matthew Torbett. Matthew talking about the class is 100% right. Those from the upper classes do have a very different view of the world. Not their fault, but I do think it reflects on our leaders and institutions and leads to wrong decisions, says Angela. On the child benefit cap, says Gary the taxi driver, I think it should be capped to only your first child and no more. It's a joke that people use this resource as an income. And thank you to Jake, who says, does the Deputy Prime Minister think we're all stupid? Why ask her if she wants to be Prime Minister? It's like asking a kid if they want candy floss. She won't admit to that. To journalists, Starmer may as well lock the front door, interestingly. Andy says, disabled people don't get free cars. They forsake their personal independence payment to help them have independent mobility. It can be hard to get wheelchair-friendly taxis. That is absolutely correct. Rachel Lebby says, good morning, Peter. Great show. Absolutely, the two-child benefit cap must stay. Look, let's be honest here, shall we? There are many people coming into our country who do not put anything in. Not a popular statement to make. They do, however, have huge families. I'll just leave this with you, except you were talking about fair. That's not fair, is it? I think it also encourages young women to be reckless, having children by different fathers. Again, not a palatable thing to say, but it is true. And then the government and the taxpayer picks up the bill, says Rachel, not mincing her words there. And we're the home of free speech and we allow all sorts of opinions, and Rachel certainly has a point there. Sue says, why doesn't the government reinstate the tax allowance transfer permitted when people have a child or children and one stays at home for a year or more to raise the children, and the working parent gets the extra tax allowance? That is how it used to be. Another person says, don't listen to the caller Mark from Lincolnshire. He's gone to UKIP. He's talking rubbish about reform. Farage being bought by the establishment is utter fantasy. L says, when I decided to have children, not once did I take into consideration how much child benefit I would receive. If that's the reason people have children, then they're having them for the wrong reasons. And many thanks to Irwing, who has sent me a picture of 3 little baby goats. And he says, these are kids. Kids are baby goats. Presumably saying I should call them children rather than kids. Kevin Hollinrake was on a little bit earlier on. He is, of course, the Conservative spokesman on housing, the Shadow Housing Secretary. He talked about this whole political controversy a bit earlier on in terms of benefits, which should be restored and which not. This is what he had to say to me.
Well, I can't afford it. I mean, that's £3.5 billion a year, I think, to scrap that. And, you know, the public finances are already in a total mess. I mean, I think the deficit this year is something like £160 billion. It would have been £110 billion. Well, it was £110 billion forecast to be when Rachel Reeves took over. She's already taxing and spending phenomenal amounts of money. She just can't afford it. The taxpayer can't afford it.
What would you do about the winter fuel allowance?
We'll reverse it. We've already said we would.
So there's money for that, but no money for this. There's $1.5 billion-ish for the winter fuel allowance, but there's not money to $3.5 billion for the two-child benefit cap. Isn't it a regressive tax? Isn't it unfair to people who just happen to have more than 2 children?
Well, the winter fuel allowance, it's a disgrace they've taken the winter fuel allowance off pensioners. And many pensioners that earn less than £11,500, £11,500 or around about that number. In fact, many people who earn less than that, if they don't want to go down the route of filling in a form for pension credit, even they won't get it. I have over 20,000 pensioners in my constituency who've lost the winter fuel allowance. It's a disgrace you would look to balance the books on the back of pensioners. So it's totally wrong that they made that decision. We voted against it. We'd do so again.
Kevin Hollinrake there, the Shadow Housing Secretary. A bit of reaction to him. I want to go to Herbie and Harrow in just a second, but I just want to play 2 short voice notes. Firstly, from Glenn.
Hi, Peter. Glenn from Suffolk here. Kevin Hollinrake, is he for real? I mean, please. I mean, they're just a busted flush. I voted 3 or 4 times in my life, and it's always been for the Tories. I will never, ever vote for them again. And obviously, I'll never vote for Labour. You know, if they ever get in again, which they probably won't, they'll just rinse and repeat. They'll do the same again. They'll get lazy and they'll just do the same again, which is basically nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Clearly getting a message in the middle of that. Kate has been in touch on Kevin Hollinrake as well.
Good morning. It's Kate from Leeds. Kevin Hollinrake MP, Shadow Housing Secretary. What the hell are you on about? Your government has lied on every single thing, and you've given so much millions and billions of pounds away. You should hold your head in shame. Now, I don't know whether you'll play this. I hope you do, because there's a lot of people that just lie through the backs of the teeth. But anyway, good show as usual. Thank you.
Kate, you say something, it's within the law. You don't use any swear words. Well, you can say maybe little ones, but not big ones. We will play it because we're the home of free speech, we're the home of common sense. You have an opinion, Kate, we just broadcast it. Very, very happy to do so. And you give him his full title there at the start as well, Kevin Hollinrake. Peter says it's a fact that if you have children, the benefits you can get from free childcare, child benefit and time off work to paternity benefits, etc., etc. Why, if you don't have children, are we on many occasions encouraged to cover for absent colleagues and pay taxes that don't benefit you, only parents with children? There is a saying, don't breed them if you can't feed them. I must say it's the first time I've heard that, but it's a good one. Surely, by saving the government money, by not having children, we should at least get some sort of benefit in kind, says Peter. Herbie's in Harrow and has been patiently waiting to give his tuppence worth on this issue. Herbie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Peter.
Hi there.
Well, making a promise that you can't keep is always a dangerous thing to do. I think it's time for people to say, we'll make a pledge if people, or we'll do our best. We need to see what state the nation's in the next 4 years. We don't know what the world's going to be like. We don't know what the country's going to be like or anything. So make all these promises that we may not be able to keep don't go down very well with the electorate, does it?
It's a very good point, Herbie. Do you think Nigel Farage making the pledge to scrap the child benefit cap, is that something he can deliver? Are you happy with his numbers? Do you think they add up in the same way as the government's or Kemi Badenoch's or whoever?
Well, the problem is, Peter, it'd be best if they said our aim is to try to do this. As I said, if the country can't afford it, if the country's not in the state to be able to do it, how can we do it? To keep making these promises, which they've always done, and then they break them, as I said, upsets a lot of people. Why don't they just say our aim is to try to do this? Because that's the best way. Then people can understand. But to say we promise to do this, well, I'm going to keep you to your promise. If you can't keep it, what are you going to do then?
Well, vote them out perhaps. Herbie, thanks so much for your thoughts. I appreciate that. That's Herbie in Harrow. That's the problem when people say politicians promise things, they don't deliver. Well, sometimes it takes a few years before you get a chance at the ballot box, and all of us only have one vote. Glennis says, hi Peter, maybe we should wait until Farage sets out his plan on Tuesday on the cap. It could be that the cap will be lifted only on working people. Well, he said his view, he's made his point on a number of different occasions. We have some of his words that he's expected to say in the Sunday Telegraph that will have been given to them by Reform Party press officers, so we know a little bit, well quite a lot actually, about what his views on this are, Glennis, but no doubt we will cover it in great depth on Tuesday, and I'm on drive, as I say, all this week, but on Tuesday as well, and no doubt we will talk about it at between 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock in Glennis. If you want to give me your view then, when you've heard maybe a bit more from Nigel Farage, you're very, very welcome to do so. Jill says, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but isn't the idea of a deputy leader that if anything should happen, either on a temporary basis or permanently, the deputy becomes the leader? You're right, Jill. It's not quite the same as vice president. Vice president is a sort of constitutional position where if the president dies, well, then the vice president becomes president. We've seen that happen, I think, on 4 separate occasions, if I remember correctly. But when it comes to deputy prime minister, not automatic. Now, if, God forbid, something should happen to Keir Starmer in regard to his health or whatever, Angela Rayner would certainly act as leader of the Labour Party. She would be acting Prime Minister for a period, but there would be a leadership election. It wouldn't be as if she would automatically become leader of the Labour Party. I'm fairly sure that's how it works. It's certainly how it works in the Conservative Party. We saw when Boris Johnson, remember, he was so unbelievably unwell, and thank goodness he recovered. Dominic Raab, who was the Deputy Prime Minister, was in charge at that stage. He was the sort of interim Prime Minister for a short period of time. Sue in West Sussex says, I felt for a long time that white men are definitely being discriminated against in our TV adverts. There's such a preponderance of black men featured now that it is out of all proportion. It's unrealistic, it's disproportionate statistically, and something I don't understand the reason for, says Sue in West Sussex. Well, that is exactly what we're going to talk about in just a second. Connor Tomlinson is standing by. He is a writer at Courage Media, and he's going to talk to us about his views on this big survey that's been done on white men who are worrying about doing or saying the wrong thing at work, feeling they're discriminated against. What do you think about this? There's time between now and 1 o'clock to get your voice on the air. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch today, including Nick, who sent me a voice note on what he believes to be a potential pensions crisis. Let's hear what Nick has to say.
Morning, Peter. It's Nick Moore from Loughborough. You spoke earlier about a potential looming pensions crisis based on the notion that as the population decreases, there won't be enough people paying into the system to provide for the old age pensioners. So the population is decreasing. This is true and it's dangerous. However, we shouldn't address that by changing the culture of the entire country. There must be other ways of dealing with this rather than surrendering our nation to a culture alien to ours. And the only party that's addressing this is Reform.
Thank you, Nick. Really appreciate your voice note there. If you want to get your voice note on in the next 26 minutes, send one through 0344 499 1000, or you can give me a ring on the same number. Right then, I want to talk about a big survey. It's in the Sunday Times newspaper today, commissioned by a 5-part podcast and YouTube series hosted by the documentary maker Tim Samuels, called White Men Can't Work. It suggests that nearly half of white men in the UK are self-censoring at work because they fear saying the wrong thing could cost them their jobs. Some 41% say they feel anxious that they can be sacked for doing or saying the wrong thing. More than a third, 36% of those under 34, say they have lost out on a promotion or other opportunities because of their race or gender. This is according to polling by JL Partners. Almost half believe they will be worse off than the current generation. 49% agree with that. More than a third overall think white men are the least valued workers in the workplace. 31% say they think their sons will have fewer opportunities because of their race or gender. Younger men are very despondent about their futures. That is what the person who commissioned this is, Tim Samuels. This is what he says. All this pushing towards populism and the likes of Andrew Tate. What do you make of this? What do you think about it? Let me know your thoughts. Let's hear the thoughts of Conor Tomlinson. He's a writer at Courage Media. Conor, does this surprise you in any way?
No, it doesn't, Peter. I mean, I remember when I left university in the midst of the pandemic, the lockdowns, and we would have a postgraduate email once a week providing graduates with prospective job opportunities. And I was, in my parents' bedroom trying to do self-employed work to make ends meet at the time and applying to large numbers of jobs. And it was really dispiriting because you'd go on the job description and it would say something innocuous like it's involved in recruitment or copywriting, and it would still say BAME applicants only apply. And you can blame, certain capricious diversity initiatives enforced by corporations headquartered in the States who are looking for ESG funding. I know the funds have diminished a lot since President Trump was elected, but part of the ability to get that investment from capital firms and hedge funds was that you had to show your commitments to diversity, equity and inclusion. But part of the reason a lot of corporations and public sector bodies do this, and remember we have per capita a larger civil service than communist China, so if you can't get a lot of private sector jobs, a lot of people will be applying to the public sector as well. A lot of the reason that they're discriminating against white men is because of pieces of legislation like the Public Sector Equality Duty in the Equality Act 2010, the Corporations Act, or the Companies Act of 2006, that says that you, as a company, have to engage in sort of corporate social responsibility and show your fealty to equality, diversity, inclusion, and the Charities Act 2011 that means that taxpayer money is spent on lobbying bodies on behalf of racial and gender grievance activists who make white men public enemy number one, and they have to uphold commitments to diversity, equity and inclusion. So if you repealed these laws, white men might get a fairer shake and they might feel less dispossessed about their own country.
So your contention is certainly that the law is stacked against white men through these different bits of legislation that you're talking about. I mean, we're told time and time again that people should have equal opportunities, but that's clearly not the case for everybody at this point. Some would argue, of course, let me play devil's advocate with this, although I basically agree with you, that for such a long time, white men had it very easy in this country, and actually women had a bad time, ethnic minorities had a bad time, there were problems in the workplace, problems in recruitment policies. Maybe this is just a correction of the market. Maybe we should just say, actually, it'll all work out in the end.
Well, the problem with that is that to object to giving women or minorities an unfair hearing in the marketplace was to complain that they were being treated with bigotry on the basis of their race and gender. Okay, then if you're applying collective punishment to white men who have done nothing wrong and have inherited this sort of burden of historical guilt, you're imposing the same race and gender discrimination on them. And I think lots of people, unfortunately, Peter, don't think of it in that way. I think there are lots of reasonable-minded people that probably listen to your show that think, yeah, you shouldn't arbitrarily discriminate against people on the basis of their race and sex. And that's why they think those discriminations in the past, those anti-meritocratic discriminations, were wrong. But there's lots of people now who do not extend morality to people that don't share their skin colour or don't share their gender because they're woke ideologues, and think, well, you know what, I'm happy that this discrimination is in place because, one, it advantages me, so I don't have to be as competent as my peers and I might get a leg up on diversity grounds, and two, if I harbour some sort of actual racist resentment towards white people, well, then diversity, equity and inclusion provides a sort of polite window dressing for my racial grievance that most people would say, well, you're a racist for thinking that about white men, if I didn't say, whoa, I'm only discriminating to correct historical injustices. So this does actually give cover to real and present anti-white racism.
Do you think most people are a little bit racist anyway in some of their attitudes? Do you believe have prejudices, not just on race, but on gender, class, whatever?
I'm not really interested in witch hunting for people's private thoughts. I think most people.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying, do you think that exists?
Well, I think the word racist is wrong to apply here. I think most people have like an in-group preference, or they're a bit tribal, so they want to be around people that are familiar to them. This is why and I'm all for this, by the way, rather than pushing people to adopt other people's cultures or live arbitrarily together, if you just give people freedom of association, they tend to cluster around groups that are culturally and religiously and ethnically proximate to them, because it kind of allows you to read the minds of the other people you're around, so it lets you turn off and be a bit more of a cognitive miser, some of your very rational thinking capacity. So it's less stressful. So I think, yeah, people are quite tribal. My issue is that, okay, fine, people are tribal and they want to associate with people that are culturally similar to them. But if you say that as a white British person in this country, you're accused as racism. But if you're an ethnic minority, you're not only allowed to do that, you're actively encouraged to do that. And so I think that we should just stop the state empowering one group to be as tribal and even vitriolic as they please, while telling the white British that if you do a similar thing, or even just want a meritocratic open playing field, you're a racist.
What about non-white people in all of this? Professor Alex Edmonds is from the London Business School is quoted in this article. It says, it may well be that sometimes there will be a white male who's qualified for the job but gets turned down for non-meritocratic reasons. I was once approached to apply for a board position because I was told that the board needed more non-white faces. I thought that's extremely insulting. I worked in South Africa for about 6 months on my gap year many years ago, and my best friend there is a mixed race woman, and she got a promotion, and I said, well done, you're a great journalist, very, very well done, fully deserved. And she said, well, no, there's so much affirmative action, positive discrimination against people who were in the really weird phrasing of the time, previously disadvantaged, that she felt she had got that promotion simply on the basis of her skin colour. I mean, it is demeaning to people to promote them simply because of something they cannot control, nothing to do with their ability, all to do with the colour of their skin or their sex or whatever.
Yeah, I know people that have had this happen to them. I mean, my fiance's gotten a job that she really wanted before, and then was very disheartened when she walked in on the first day and learned that essentially there were too few women in the company. So she had her application, which was, glowing, and she was very well suited for the job, but bumped up the list purely because she was a woman. I also had a friend, there was a scandal a couple of years ago at the University of Kent, where I went to, where the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Coordinator had put out a white privilege questionnaire and said that, if you can walk around the shop without being followed by a security guard, or if you can wear second-hand clothes without people making a comment, then you're white privileged. This same woman approached a mixed-race fellow who was on the student union board. He was elected there because he's a very popular member of campus, great guy. And she said to him, well, you're our only minority male staff member, so you've got to do Black History Month. Wasn't in his job description, but just imposed it upon him, thinking that he had some sort of racial consciousness. And he was very resentful of this. So, look, there are quite a few people who, unfortunately, as we saw with Black Lives Matter, the sort of unleashing of racial resentment, there are quite a few minorities in the country who do not hold the same individualistic, meritocratic ethos as you or I do, Peter. But there are also quite a lot of people who are ethno-cultural traditionalists, this is Eric Kaufman's term, who come from another country but identify strongly with the culture, with the people, and would like to see those people thrive and flourish and live in that country because they came to the country because they want to be in it, who feel very insulted if they are only put in a job because of the colour of their skin, not the content of their character.
Connor, thank you. Very, very interesting to talk to you. That's Connor Tomlinson there, writer at Courage Media. This is a new poll. It's in the Sunday Times today about white men. Lots of people getting in touch about this. Debbie says, you do have to watch what you say at work. I work in a job centre, and a claimant once said to me, it all looks very white in here. He was obviously trying to trip me up. I said simply, unfortunately, we don't get to choose the colour of paint they use. I think it's probably magnolia. Betty says, I was in Canada and overheard some workers in an airport complaining the government was recovering the tax on all the furlough they received tax-free to pay for their pensions. Sounds like a great saving for the UK taxpayer. Brittany in the United States says giving back the winter fuel allowance for seniors and pensioners should come first. I understand that there should be something for single mothers and all of that, but when it comes down to women not keeping, oh goodness, right, I'm not going to read out exactly what Brittany has said, but she's talking about women getting pregnant. and taking advantage of the system. It is utter hogwash, says Brittany from the USA, in slightly graphic terms that I'm not going to read out at 1:45 in the afternoon. Polly says the caller regarding Farage is spot on. The ego is landed, will not make a good PM, and it matters little what promises he makes. Where are his opinions on news stories about Lucy Connolly? Nowhere. He is nothing more than a centrist party. I'm ex-reform and proud to be so, says Polly. I'm sure Nigel Farage will have something to say about Lucy Connolly this week. He has been on holiday since, I think, her appeal failed in the Court of Appeal. That was this week, if I remember correctly, when he's been on holiday. Barry says, these people attacking mobility worry me. I'm a mobility impaired. I have a mobility car. I can walk far, use buses and I can't walk far, use buses, and taxis are expensive. Without my car, I'd be literally trapped in my house. I give up all of the mobility part of my personal independence payments for this. It is not free. Well, there are quite a few people who want to get on the air. Miranda and George are waiting. We will come to them in just a second here on Talk.
Even though what she tweeted was vile, in no circumstances can I claim or justify that it was an incitement to violence, because she very clearly says in her tweet that actually they can burn these hotels for all I care. Now, that is not an incitement to violence. That is basically a declaration that she has no care for these people living in her communities who she perceived to be a threat to the communities. And she should never have been arrested. She should never have been charged. She should never have been convicted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Mike, who's been in touch on Twitter, who says, the bias against white men is plain to see. We've heard of misogynoir. This is Miss Sandy Blank. Misandrous commentators are celebrated, rewarded, and get TV and radio interviews. Millie Cullum Inches. Thank you to James, who says, child benefit, £26 a week, doesn't even cover nappies, wipes, etc. The big scandal that nobody is talking about is childcare costs. Oh, and the big elephant in the room, the population replacement percentage, which has collapsed throughout the West. Let's hear a voice note before we go to Miranda and George. I promise I'll go to them in a second. From Rob on benefits.
Hello, Peter. Robin Starbridge here. Peter, great show, but just a question for you, mate. How come nobody in the media, and yourselves included, ask any of these politicians or government representatives, Why not scrap the benefits for illegal immigrants? Why is it always our pensioners suffering? Why is it always our kids suffering? Why is it always our farmers suffering? Why is it always our services suffering? Ask them, you know, instead of taking it off the old age pensioners, what about taking it off the illegal immigrants who have illegally come into this country and done nothing for it? Absolutely nothing, Pete. None of you will ask them that question, will you? Cheers, mate.
Rob, thanks for your message. I have asked that question before. I've said to government ministers, I've said to people on this programme and other programmes as well, how on earth is it fair that people who've contributed absolutely nothing to this country get benefits that people don't? They see, I've said this numerous times where I say, you know, everyone knows that hotel down the road that people say, oh, we'll maybe go there for Mother's Day, a bit pricey, but we can maybe go there Mother's Day or wedding anniversary or a special occasion. And then you think, hold on a second, there are all these people coming there who've contributed nothing to our country who are there. They're warm, unlike the people who've lost their winter fuel allowance, and getting 3 meals a day and staying there for free. It's something I've brought up on a number of occasions, Rob, but listen, I totally understand your frustration, and something we're going to continue to talk about. Right then, George and Miranda, as promised, George in Dundee is first. George, sorry to keep you waiting, mate. What would you like to say?
It's regarding this... the bias towards white men. I would say it's also not just gender and race. I would also say sexuality. I would say white working class heterosexual men are at the bottom of the pile in this country. And I think especially if you're employed in the public sector, you're at the bottom of the pile. You ain't going that far nowadays if you're a white working class heterosexual male.
Why do you say that, George? What's that based on?
I mean, it's based on questionnaires. Every time you go for employment, your questionnaires is asking about your sexuality, your gender, and your race. When I've worked in the public sector in the past, you've seen guys, white guys, heterosexual guys that were overlooked for jobs, not so much from other races at that time, but more from women, women promoted above them. And it was always known, unsaid, that it was just to tick boxes, just to get more women in positions of management and power. The other thing I'd like to say, Peter, is...
Just before you do say the second thing, yeah. George, I mean, if I was a woman, I'd be pretty, not by what you've said, but I mean, if I was promoted simply because I was a woman, if I was promoted simply because I'm from Northern Ireland or I'm a man or whatever, I mean, that would be pretty insulting, wouldn't it?
Well, it's insulting, but if your wages are going up £10,000...
Yeah, you'd maybe suck it up, yeah.
You'd maybe suck it up, as you say.
What was the second point you were going to make, George? Sorry, I interrupted you there.
The second point is the way white working class men are portrayed on the television. If you watch any of the soaps, know that I do, but I glance up now and again when my wife's watching them. White working class men are either portrayed as buffoons in these programmes, evil, or complete thugs. That's the way they're portrayed. You never get a white working class guy that's salt of the earth, does his job, looks after his family. The way we are portrayed now in the media, I think, is a real inherent bias, and it wouldn't be... it's like portraying a Scotsman with a ginger wig and a kilt dancing about. It's just, you wouldn't get that with other races, and you certainly wouldn't get it with women nowadays.
George, powerful points there. Thank you for them. Miranda is in Cumbria and has been waiting patiently as well. Miranda, what would you like to say?
I would like to say that my prospective son-in-law, he has PhD in something called tax company, and it's to do with drugs, electron microscopes, chemistry, maths.
Sounds like a bright guy.
Very, very bright. And he's applied for several jobs, one on FaceTime, and came to the end of the interview. They said, "We are perfect, we'd love to have you, but you do not have enough ethnicity about you." Those were the words they actually said. You
do not have enough ethnicity about you?
That's what they said.
And he's I'm presuming he's a white man, Miranda.
Yeah, he's a white man.
Well, being white is an ethnicity.
Sorry?
Being white is an ethnicity. I mean, that person is factually wrong as well as very crass in what they said to your prospective son-in-law.
Absolutely, but this is what he said. He's one of the world's leading authorities on the subject which he studied. He cannot get a job. And I once looked for jobs for him. I was looking at scholarships at Oxford and Cambridge University, and it actually said on one of the jobs related to chemistry, previous occupants need not apply. We're specifically looking for a black female.
I mean, that's absurd. You should have the best person for the job. I don't,
Absolutely, it should be a meritocracy. And essentially, when you're thinking about chemistry, or if you're thinking about drugs and innovation in the future, if you aren't taking the best, then things like, cancer treatments, etc., drug therapies for other, terrible disorders that people can have, you aren't going to be able to find a cure for these things or promote a drug which is actually going to help or prolong life. And it's just insanity. It should be a meritocracy, no matter what colour or ethnicity or whatever. It's just, you take the best person for the job. It was like with the police when they said they were outside Aldi, trying to recruit people who maybe didn't speak English. It's just insanity.
Yeah. Well, Miranda, one test he's clearly passed is that with his mother-in-law. Is he the best man to be your daughter's husband?
Yes, he's absolutely lovely.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I hope that harmonious relationship continues for many, many years to come. Miranda, thank you for that. That's Miranda in Cumbria, and thanks for her patience as well. Let's get through a few voice notes now. David has got one on Labour.
Good afternoon, Peter. Dave here from North Down. Angela Rayner is lying. Keir Starmer lies. The Labour Party lies. Can you see the pattern here? They tell you one thing, they lie on their CVs, they say they're solicitors when they're not. This party is just built on lies, and the people know this now, and they will not vote for them. Good show as usual, Peter.
Thank you, David. Joe has been in touch on the child benefits cap.
Pete, it's Joe from Wigan. Love your show. On the child benefit cap, as the other woman said, you don't decide to have children just based on the child benefit allowance. However, we do need to look at the population declining and people not having enough children. Otherwise, we will have to bring in migrants of 500,000 a year, and in 10 years' time, this country may not even look the same, which is sad.
Thank you, Joe. David?
He keeps on saying that he wants to cut the benefits. Now he's adding to it.
Very good point on Keir Starmer. Another, David?
What really gets me, more than anything, is the reporters, when they ask questions to these politicians, why don't they stick to the same questions until they get the right answer, instead of skimming over it?
You can't ask the same question over and over again. Well, you can, I suppose. I mean, I just think, there's so many things I want to ask politicians about all the time, and all sorts of other guests. If they don't answer the question, you maybe try a couple of times. But, I mean, Jeremy Paxman, my hero, brilliant interviewer, once asked Michael Howard the same question 14 times. John in Orpington's been in touch and says, George, talking about how white males are so negatively portrayed on TV and advertising, especially advertising, so bang on the money. Great call, George. And Debbie says, if government stopped funding the Great British Invasion, then the benefits bill wouldn't be so high. There would be jobs for British people, and people wouldn't be thinking, why should I work when all these invaders get everything for free, says Debbie. Thanks for all your opinions today. Loads of people in touch. John says, the white male in Britain has been almost demonised over recent years. Fortunately, I finished work now, but my last employer was a police service. I've seen white men lose out on promotion and almost sacked for innocuous comments. I've seen totally unsuitable people get promoted. It is shocking. Hopefully it will change one day, says John. Well, a number of people who are here completely on merit and nothing to do with any other factor include Alicia Bloom, the producer of this programme, Farisa Baljam-Baeva, who has been the setup producer, Tommy Bateson, the assistant producer, Dave Rhodes, the technical operator, Luke Vincent and Davis Fang, the visual producers, Pádraig Birmingham, the video editor, and Dean Spencer, the weekend editor. So thank you very much indeed to all of them for all their work putting the show together today. It's a massive day in football, in the football world, as the Premier League is drawing to a close across the talkSPORT network. And here on Talk, we'll bring you live commentary of 7 matches to cap off a thrilling campaign. We'll also have reporters in all the stadiums across the land to keep you right up to date. And here on Talk, we'll switch to Talk Sport's excellent coverage from 1 o'clock, in just a couple of minutes' time. And from 4 o'clock, you can hear Fulham's visit